What company is so terrible that you're boycotting them forever? StubHub, the way they handled the pandemic with changing their policies and peak pandemic so that people could only recover credit or resell their tickets instead of receiving cash for cancelled events, was ridiculous. I was forced to hold my Coachella ticket for 2 years, and then they just decided to refund everyone for this year when they realized that they'd make more money since the ticket prices will surge when the event is back in 2023. Screw StubHub. Oh, StubHub is so bad. I had the app, so I put a 2-ticket package in my cart, but when I went to check out, it had changed to 1 ticket. It was the same price, so they charged me $80 for 1 ticket when it was the same price for 2 tickets. Why did the number of tickets change once I added them to the cart? Bullcrap. So I called and complained, and of course, "There's nothing we can do about it, sir. We can't cancel the transaction." So I filed a fraud claim at my bank and got it back. Screw StubHub. Shaw Academy, sleazy little fricks. Their lies and advertising and nearly impossible to cancel a subscription with them. Tried doing a course that was, quote, a free 4-week course. The course was free for the first 4 weeks, but the way they sold it was that the course itself was 4 weeks and free. They say you can finish a course as fast or as long as you want, but I think it actually caps out at 3 lessons a week, making you stay in the program for a few months, paying monthly. Trying to cancel is a nightmare. Sifting through pages and pages of, "Are you sure you want to cancel?" and "Here's a 5% discount," or "Fill this form out, now this one, and now this one." All to get to a phone number that's only valid to call for a couple of hours a day. When you finally get to call, it's an automated message. 10 minutes of a robot telling me it cares about me and it wants me to stay, only to finally press 2 to cancel my subscription. Frick Shaw Academy. Nestlé. I may inadvertently grab one of its products, but when I see the name, I always put it back. I keep a list of their brands on my phone because most of their stuff doesn't even say Nestlé. The ones that apply most to me are Gerber and Purina, but I also have to periodically remind myself that they own stuff like Hot Pockets and most bottled water brands as well. I only buy bottled water on road trips, but I always check the Nestlé list before I do. The same goes for Frito-Lay now too. No more Fritos, Cheetos, Doritos, Tostitos, Lays, or Ruffles. Yep, Nestlé knows that everyone knows about how bad they are now, to the point where they're actively hiding their name on all of their subordinate brands' products. It's sneaky as all heck. Expedia and all of the sites they own or control, which is a lot of them. Expedia screwed me over in a bad way, and then their customer service people insulted me when I tried to call attention to the serious issues. Ultimately, they offered me a gift card as a take-it-or-leave-it solution to the entire issue. I left it and went on a crusade to slam them on Twitter. I did it for a long time, but eventually got bored. The issue? Their website lets someone use my email address to buy plane tickets. The person didn't need my password. I believe they just made a typo that resulted in them using my email address in the required field. When I got an email confirmation about my airline tickets, I called to say it was wrong. Expedia cancelled their tickets and called it settled. When the actual customer arrived at the airport and their tickets were cancelled, they called Expedia. The rep from Expedia told them I cancelled their ticket and then gave this angry person my full name and my cell phone number so that he and I could sort it out between the two of us. The guy was furious and made vague threats, so I contacted Expedia customer service to get this addressed. When I refused their offer of a $50 Expedia gift card, they told me I could suck a soft member or a throbbing hard one. My choice. I declined to do either, and we parted ways forever. And yes, it must have been illegal for them to give out my number like that, but I wasn't going to hire a lawyer and sue over it. Even if I won, it would be a pain in the crotch for minimal cash, and the lawyers would get most of it. I settled for petty online revenge, but my time is valuable, and that got old after a few years. The end. eBay. I escaped an awful relationship and was changing all of my passwords to random combinations. I set it to log out of all devices and forced the password to be re-entered. It wasn't actually doing that. I tried from multiple devices, so it wasn't a keylogger or anything that my ex was doing. I also confirmed that I'd logged out on other devices, reset password, and clicked to log out of all devices, but it just wasn't logging out of them when I clicked to do so. So my awful ex was bidding and winning auctions. So I called eBay to report the issue. They said it wasn't that my account had been hacked or fraud because I knew who was doing it. They would do nothing. They said I just had to take the bad feedback and be blacklisted, and that I should pick better partners in the future. It didn't matter that they had major security flaws. All I could do was remove the payment options from my account so that he couldn't pay for his auctions. I will never use them again. I had a non-delivery happen on my last order. I contacted the seller, who said it wasn't their fault. I contacted eBay, and they wouldn't help me either. I kept contacting and finally called UPS. They said I just needed to give eBay some code from them that showed that they screwed up the delivery. When I contacted eBay about it the last time, they were like, "Oh yeah, that works. Here's your refund." Why couldn't they have told me that in the beginning? Anything that has even a hint of MLM, you've got to stop exploiting your personal relationships out of greed. MLM? You mean moms losing money? Ugh, I hate multi-level marketing. Not just because people send you predatory mail, but because they prey on vulnerable people. People who are struggling to find work, parents trying to return to work after parental leave, people who are in real need of income and willing to do anything. Then they tow them along with this idea that as long as they recruit others, they'll be okay. I know it's easy to be mad at the people sending emails or trying to get their friends to sign up, but to be honest, I just feel sorry for them and a desire to remove them from that situation. It's predatory as heck, and it encourages people to get in so deep that they can't see a way out. The Susan G. Komen Foundation. They employ alphabet soup and lawyer speak to defraud millions of people. Note that they don't fund research, nor do they help patients. They're an advertising company. They advertise cancer awareness, because apparently someone might be unaware of cancer. What the heck? Harvey Norman. They have terrible customer service, and they took a whole lot of Australian government money that they didn't deserve and are refusing to give it back. Once upon a time, when internet shopping was new and novel, a lot of people didn't trust it because they were afraid of providing their credit card details to the World Wide Web. It was a time when you were told, don't tell anyone online your name or where you live. However, slowly, people started to adapt to buying things online as they saw the convenience of being able to make purchases and get those items delivered. More websites began getting into the online shopping space, and internet shopping started to gain momentum. People realized they could buy things online, and even with the currency conversion and shipping fees, it still worked out cheaper than buying in a traditional brick-and-mortar store. That's how much we were getting ripped off in Australia. The main drawback was back then there were long shipping times. Jerry Harvey, the multi-billionaire, started to whinge and complain that online shipping was hurting his business. He'd had it good for decades ripping off the Aussie consumer, and with the advent of internet shopping, he could see his profits starting to decline. He said it was bullcrap, consumers had a choice to purchase online, and that there could be a warranty issue or fake products or whatever crap that spewed out of his mouth. Every Christmas period, he'd go on television and complain if sales had decreased from the previous holiday season, or if there was only a slight increase in sales. If sales were good for that year, he'd be happy and say spending was up. At the time, goods and services tax was exempt for online purchases from overseas if the total was below $1,000. So one day, Jerry Harvey, the greedy grifter, decides to lobby the Australian government to reduce that threshold to $300 and say Australian businesses can't compete with overseas retailers. Somehow, buying an item online, paying currency conversion fees and international shipping still ended up cheaper, yet to hear it from him, Australian consumers aren't being ripped off. There was much public backlash to the fudgewit Jerry Harvey's proposal. Politicians scrapped the idea. Jerry complains and whinges and whines. Years later, he lobbies the government again. However, this time it's not to reduce the threshold to $300, but he wants all purchases from overseas to be liable for the global sales tax, or GST. Somehow, this time it passes. Not sure how many bribes he had to make in order to have that happen, but there you go. This is the same prick that told everyone to spend their $900 financial crisis stimulus money in 2008 on plasma screens in his stores. Every time that you make a purchase online from overseas and it's more expensive by 10%, you can thank your multi-billionaire friend Jerry Harvey. How much more money does the greedy piece of doo-doo want? I will never buy anything from a Harvey Norman store ever again. I know people that pay more for an item to avoid buying from there. I probably wouldn't even pee on Jerry Harvey if he was on fire. They had this brand when the narrator lived in that neck of the woods for a while, and yes, it was too expensive for more or less the same products that you could buy anywhere else. I'm a big proponent of brick-and-mortar stores when possible, but guys like this Harvey fellow really make that a bit harder sometimes. Comcast. I wish I had the option to use anything else. Look people, I know Starlink is a thing. Paying twice as much per month with a huge setup fee for internet that has even more frequent outages isn't exactly a good decision. Not to mention it's not even an option since I live in a huge apartment building. FedEx, as much as I can help it anyway. I obviously can't fully boycott them if it's the only delivery option on an e-commerce website or if some company happens to ship me something via FedEx, but I've literally chosen to pay more on an e-commerce website to specifically not use FedEx as a shipping service. The reason? When I bought my Pixel 3, the first day it was supposed to arrive, I worked from home that day to sign for my new package. They never arrived and on tracking wrote that I wasn't home to receive the package. I was furious, so I spent the next 2 days working from home and even did my work in the kitchen so that I could physically see if any delivery driver actually walked up to my door. 3 straight frickin' days in a row, not a single person comes up. My door cam doesn't even show them walking up, but they have the mother frickin' audacity to claim I wasn't home 3 straight days in a row. I ended up having to pick it up at their facility, just because they lied 3 times in a row even after a phone call each day the first 2 days. The customer service person even told me that I probably missed them when I went to the restroom or something. Can't even own up to the frickin' fact that everybody in their company was a bunch of frickin' liars. So for that reason alone, I pay more for shipping as long as it's not FedEx. I've specifically driven a further distance to get something printed at Staples or Office Depot just so I don't step foot in a FedEx store. Boycotting FedEx until the day I die. This is too late for you, but maybe it can help someone else. FedEx did the exact same thing to me, but I was able to get my package within a few hours. I work from home and I was expecting my new iPhone, which was rush shipped for early morning delivery. I put a note for the driver on my door that said I was home and to knock. I kept refreshing the tracking info until finally it said a delivery was attempted, but I wasn't home. I called the customer service line and sat on hold for 45 minutes before reaching a series of people who kept passing me off to someone else. Finally, I ended up with a very nice woman who was honest as F with me. Told me she was looking at his location and he scanned the package miles and miles away from my house. She called someone at the local dispatch who was able to get in touch with the driver and have him drive across the city to get my package to me. I left the note on my door just to mess with him and yep, he was angry. How dare you hold him accountable and make him do his job? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I was boycotting Blockbuster for charging me late fees because they lost the tape I returned in their evening return slot. Screw those guys, they aren't getting my business. You sure showed them. They only have one store left. So what you're saying is, the job's not done yet. I used to live in an apartment next door to a pizza place. The pizza was decent, so I went there at least once a week. There was a woman who worked there who usually wasn't the most friendly, but I never really had an issue. I wasn't the chatty type, but I was a regular, so I'm pretty sure all the employees recognized me. One time though, I walk in and it's her and another employee working there. The woman is in the back, so I order my usual 2 slices with the other employee, who puts them in the oven and stands by the counter watching TV to wait. A minute later, the woman comes in on the phone and asks me, "Did you order?" I said, "Yeah, I just got 2 slices." For some reason, she assumed the other employee hadn't done anything, so she puts 2 more slices in the oven. I wasn't really paying attention, so I didn't think anything of it. A minute later, the other employee walks back in, takes the 2 slices she put in for me, and boxes them up. That's when the woman realizes what had happened, I still hadn't realized by the way, and completely loses her mind at me. She starts screaming, "Why didn't you say your slices were already in there? Now I just wasted these," and dramatically dumps them in the trash. "What's wrong with you?" The whole place goes dead silent and everyone is just staring at me. I'm just standing there bewildered and trying to make sense of what had just happened, so I just blurt out, "Sorry," and walk out. As the shock wore off, I replayed the events in my head, realizing that I didn't really do anything wrong, or at worst, it was just an honest misunderstanding. I got pretty upset that I got yelled at like a child, especially after being a regular for years. At that moment, I decided that I'm never stepping foot in that pizza place ever again. And I didn't. I lived next to it for another 3 years and not once went in or even ordered from it. Pretty much anything in one of those unskippable YouTube ads. State Farm. Thanks to some whistleblowers, they got busted committing fraud against their customers and the federal government after Hurricane Katrina. They told their claims adjusters to classify damage as flood damage rather than wind damage so that they could reject the claim and tell customers to file a federal flood insurance claim. Katrina survivor here had a $250K policy. I had to sue them due to non-payment to only end up with $20K. I hate the insurance industry with a passion. Lifetime Fitness. It really pains me to write this because I really love their gyms actually. I had a membership of Lifetime on and off through college. I went to a large university with great amenities, so I didn't need the membership during the school year. I tried to cancel at the end of one summer, I was at the gym one day and I asked about the cancellation. I was told to come back at a certain time frame the following Wednesday to cancel. So I complied. When I showed up, "Oh, sorry, the person doing the cancellations isn't here." I was told to return the following Wednesday. Surprise, surprise, the person wasn't there yet again. I told them I was going to stop the payments through the credit card company, and they responded by telling me that they'd take me to collections then. I ended up escalating through their corporate offices to get the membership cancelled. They managed to get 2 extra months out of me. After that year of college, I shifted over to LA Fitness and maintained that membership for about 10 years. When I moved away from LA Fitness, I joined the YMCA, where I've been for the last 5 or 6 years. I'll always have a gym membership in my lifetime, but I'm committed to not joining a Lifetime Fitness again until I'm reimbursed. It's really a loss for both of us. If you're between gyms, I do encourage you to check out your local YMCA. YMCAs are unique in that their membership cost structure is designed to subsidize memberships for individuals and families that otherwise couldn't afford one. They also tend to be active in the community, hosting events like the Special Olympics. Look, if you're going to buy a membership to a place that you're going to constantly torture yourself for not going to enough, do yourself the favor of Googling the prices and reviews of the gyms around you. Even if the price looks enticing, these places can really screw you for a while if their owners are sleazy. And sadly enough, there seem to be a lot of these in the business. This video is not brought to you by the YMCA. I've been boycotting Carnival Cruise Line ever since I found out they're dumping plastic into the Bahamas. They even admitted it and received a $20 million fine. Sirius XM Radio. If you've ever dealt with customer service when trying to cancel your subscription, you'll also understand why. Also, they'll straight up renew your subscription at 1,000 times the price and fight tooth and nail to not refund you. And they'll bombard you with mail and email and texts for the next 10 years. Screw them. Yelp. They're terrible to small businesses and require them to pay a fortune for ads to bury any negative reviews. If the business doesn't spend on ads, they bury the positive reviews. Yelp also seems to attract the worst critics. PetSmart. My aunt works there and said she's surprised that every animal in there hasn't died yet. Multi-level marketing schemes. They're crap companies that attract crappy and sometimes desperate people and train them on how to profit off of their friends and families. They destroy lives and I refuse to support them. Caskets, headstones, and burial plots. Facebook. If you're doing it, make sure you also boycott the other apps and services they own, including Instagram and WhatsApp. Microtransactions in games that are only there to speed up ridiculously slow progression models. EA Sports because they ruined my favorite video game genre. I haven't given them a dime since 2017, and I'm not planning on doing so anytime soon. Walmart. I worked there and I hate it with a passion. I work for Walmart and I'll only shop there if I have to. The 10% discount I get from working at the DC doesn't even apply to half the stuff in the store. Yesterday, me and some friends went to get groceries on our camping trip and got $6.11 off of our $124 bill. Even if you take out the case of alcohol, $6.11 isn't 10% of $110. I wish I could boycott or avoid those stupid Huel adverts with that grinning idiot in the hat. Hugh, thanks Hugh, I've more energy than my 20s. So whack. The Oscars. Screw the Oscars. That Hollywood back-scratching circle has absolutely no business telling anyone what cinema is. 2017 Boss Baby got nominated for Best Animated Feature, but Your Name didn't? Excuse me, what the frick? Then 30+ people die in an arson attack on an animation studio in Japan, and not so much as a single word during the remembrance section. If that happened to Pixar, they would have given them a full-on 20-minute segment. It's a confirmed fact that the animated feature category at the Oscars is seen as a joke. The jury literally doesn't watch the nominees, they just automatically vote for Pixar or the most famous movie. This isn't even a joke. At the awards where Song of the Sea was nominated for Best Animated Feature, and everyone thought it would win, the jury explicitly admitted they didn't watch Song of the Sea. One of the jurors even said that he didn't watch it because he didn't watch Chinese crap, even though Song of the Sea was 100% an Irish production. The studio which created Song of the Sea has also made 2 other films which were predicted to win and were also snubbed: Secret of Kells and Wolfwalkers. After Wolfwalkers, if I were a director, I'd honestly just reject any further nominations until they get a jury that actually likes to watch animated movies. Any company or brand that puts advertisements on boat billboards that trawl the beach and mess up my horizon line. That is not a fair spot to try to capture my attention. Imagine, you emerge from the Perez Art Museum, Miami, to take a bayfront stroll, only to be confronted by a jumbo screen advertisement for Senor Frogs cruising through the water. You were contemplating sculpture, now you're just blinking at a 12-foot-tall person who's dancing and eating burritos. Your attempt to enjoy a scenic view has been scuttled by a floating billboard. Hoping to escape crass commercialism at the beach? Forget it. Whether you're sitting on the sand or wading in the ocean, it's impossible not to notice the barge chugging back and forth parallel to shore. Its cargo is a 46-foot-long double-sided LED sign displaying a loop of ads for beer, sportswear, nightclubs, cell phones, airlines, TV shows, restaurants, and ice cream. Ire and jokes aside, the floating billboards aren't going away. In fact, they're so popular with advertisers that Ballyhoo Media, the Miami company that invented the innovative outdoor consumer marketing platform, has plans to expand to new cities and add special events, such as a Miami beachfront screening of Jaws this summer during Discovery Channel's Shark Week. Just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, more ads. BP Gas. How they handled the Gulf oil spill and then acted like frickin' children about violations made me so angry. One guy literally told the judges that everyone does it when asked why they didn't follow the guidelines. When did you see someone so ungrateful they made you just give up on being nice? Today is my niece's birthday and she just went to college, so I thought I'd get her a laptop for her birthday. Now, I'm a student myself, but I still want to give her something special. So I searched for a great used laptop and I found a decent Toshiba Satellite. I sold my PlayStation Portable and some other things so that I could afford it. So we were there at the dinner table opening presents. She opened mine and had this grim look on her face. "Oh, this is it? I thought you'd buy me a new one." "You know, I can't afford one. This is the best I can do." "I want a brand new one, not this. This sucks. Worst present ever." She then shoved the laptop and box across the table and it fell on the floor. I picked it up and just walked out. My cousin tried to stop me and I just said, I will never give her anything ever again. She even had the nerve to call back and ask for the laptop. Apparently her parents had punished her for her behavior and she'll now have to buy her own things. No handouts or gifts. My friend bought it back from me as a favor. He helped to pick it out and knows how much I bought it for. The profit was only about $10, roughly. Update, my niece called again this morning asking for the laptop because she'll need it for college and her parents are still holding firm on her never being handed out stuff while she's there. No apology yet, only demands. Her brother said I'd cave and give it to her. Frick no and frick you, niece. I always wanted to believe this kind of behavior only happens on television. I mean, you're getting free stuff, how can you not like that? I get socks for Christmas and I get fricking excited. Frickin' free socks, man. A couple of years ago, a friend and I were driving across the country in a big moving truck full of my mum's furniture. We'd been on the road for about 18 hours on the second to last day of the trip, and stopped at a rest stop to stretch our legs and use the bathroom. Sitting at the rest stop late at night was an entire family, dad and 2 young kids, and their car, which was obviously broken or otherwise not working. Feeling like I should try and help, I asked the father what was wrong, and he told me they'd run out of gas and just needed to get to the next town, which was about 40 miles away. I couldn't leave the rest stop with that family stranded, so my friend and I got back in the truck and drove the 40 miles to the next town, bought gas and a can, and drove all the way back in a huge moving truck. The whole trip back and forth took us about an hour and a half, and by the time we got to the rest stop, we were both about to pass out. Well, the family was still there waiting, and I hopped out to give them the gas they needed so badly. I handed the can to the father, and he looked at me and said, "I'd rather have the money." This caught me off guard as the money wouldn't have helped get them anywhere, but it was then that it dawned on me that he never wanted gas to begin with, and he probably even had some in the car. He was just fishing for cash and using his kids as the bait. I felt really bad for the mum as she was just looking at me the whole time with this expression of, "I'm so sorry." I was at loss for words, since the dad didn't even want the gas we'd just driven over an hour to get for them. I just set the gas can on the ground, got back in the truck, and left feeling like a giant idiot. This is why so many people are jaded about helping out other people. Admittedly, myself at times too. It's gross behavior and a terrible example to set for your kids. My cousin gave my son a broken PlayStation 2 for his birthday. I fixed it. I just needed to clean the optic on the player. Then the cousin asked for it back. I absolutely told him no. I delivered a pizza in a low-income type apartment complex. The total was $18 something, and she just handed me a 20 rolled up and told me to keep the change. I turned around and started walking down the stairs back to the parking lot while unrolling the $20 to put in my wad of cash, when I find a $100 bill wrapped up inside of the 20. Immediately, I turned around and went back, knocked, and said, "I don't think you meant to include this inside the 20, as I extended my hand towards her with a $100 bill in it. She immediately started screaming at me about how she didn't give me no $100 tip and that I'm lucky she doesn't call the police. Slammed the door, then called my pizza shop to complain. I told the manager the whole story. She was put on the do not answer list. Crazy lady. I had something similar happen at an ATM. The guy before me had pulled out what looked like $400 and then walked away without taking the cash. I didn't realize what had happened at first, so by the time I put 2 and 2 together, he was out of the store. I grabbed the money, ran after him, and caught him in the parking lot. I handed him the cash and he violently grabbed it from me and started talking crap about me trying to steal his money. He started getting in my face when his friend mentioned that before he'd ever met me, he was $400 down. Then I came along and he's back to even, ending with, "What the frick is wrong with you?" The guy never thanked me, but his friend did. When we were young, we were very poor. My sister's birthday was coming up. I think she was about 7. There was no money to buy gifts, but my mother had a small piece of white satin cloth and a box of tiny little pearl beads. She had hand-sewed this beautiful little wedding gown for my sister's doll and sat up night after night hand-sewing these tiny little beads on the dress. When my sister was given it for her birthday, she threw it across the room in disgust, saying, "I don't want that, it's my old dolly." I'll never forget the heartbreak on my mother's face. The stories in this thread make me afraid that when I have kids, they'll be spoiled brats. Oh, don't be afraid. It's something you can control. It's up to parents to teach their kids grace and humility. Look, my parents didn't say no to my siblings or I very often. We were spoiled, but we certainly weren't brats about it. And I think there were 2 key things to this. First, before we were allowed to play with any toy or gift we received, we had to write a thank you note for it. And nothing low effort in the thank you notes. They had to be sincere and take up the whole gosh darn card. Doing that makes you think long and hard about why someone would choose something for you, what they intended, and what you like about a present that might otherwise befuddle you. Second, if you didn't react with grace and gratefulness, you didn't get to keep the gift. End of story. If you reacted like a real brat, you didn't get to keep any of them. They were harsh with this rule too. Even a sour face could get the gift revoked. As a kid, you learn real quickly that gifts are a privilege and a gesture. You always respond with a smile and a heartfelt thank you, even if your odd relative just gave you items from her pantry wrapped. She gave them generously, you respond kindly. A girl in my high school received a used car on her 16th birthday. She was unhappy with the fact that it was a 3-year-old car. She intentionally totaled it. Her thinking was that if she totaled this one, her parents would have to buy her a new one. She didn't get a new car and had to ride the bus. I knew a girl who did that too, except with a nice little Ranger. It was a couple of years old, but had all of the bells and whistles except 4-wheel drive. That wasn't good enough for her, so she wrecked it intentionally. She fractured her neck and had to walk around with a cervical collar for a couple of months. And then her parents brought her a piece of crap 1980 Ford Escort. When I was 15, a girl in my driver's ed class turned red and stood up. She put her hands to her throat, couldn't make a sound. Her eyes looked crazy. She was choking on a piece of candy. Everyone looked for 1 beat, 2 beats, and I'm like, what the hell? And I stand up, walk over 2 tables, and give her the Heimlich. On the second attempt, the candy flies out like 10 feet like in a movie or something. She starts gasping and bawling. It's a big scene. She thanks me. The next day at class, when our parents are picking us up, she's walking down the hall with her white trash mum. They walk up to me. I'm expecting a thank you from the mum or something. I've never seen this lady before, and as she gets close, she starts yelling, "What did you think you were doing? You aren't a doctor or a nurse. You could have broken her ribs. You're lucky I don't get a lawyer and sue your family. I still might." And it went on and on like that for about 5 minutes. I used to work for a local car dealership. I was selling the cheapest car on the lot to a dad and his daughter. It was a 2000 Daewoo for $3,000. She was so excited to have her own car, and it was what her dad could afford her. At the same time, another salesperson was selling a brand new Eddie Bauer Explorer to a dad as a present to his daughter. As I was presenting the Daewoo to the new owners, the daughter of the other dad comes in to see her new Explorer. She started an absolute tantrum and yells, "I didn't want an Explorer, I wanted an Expedition." I was really proud of the dad of the Explorer. As he walked back into the finance office, he changed the deal. He corroborated with the guy buying the Daewoo and switched the names. So the girl crying over her Explorer now had a crappy Daewoo, and the girl who was really grateful to have a car ended up with a fully loaded, paid-off Explorer. I would never have believed it if I hadn't been the salesperson. It does stretch credulity, as you say, but my god, that is one heck of a tale of instant karma if it's true. I can't ever imagine having that much money that I could laugh off an expense like that, but good on the guy for doing his best not to pass on rich person entitlement to his daughter. Valentine's Day 2004. Now, I've never given two craps about Valentine's Day, but my girlfriend at the time had never been in a serious relationship and wanted a special Valentine's Day. I was more than happy to oblige for her. That day, I went to the local flower nursery where I used to work and bought 24 red roses and grabbed an unused delivery invoice. I still had the uniform, just a t-shirt and hat, but enough to make me look like a legit delivery person. I then spent my entire paycheck on gifts for her and food for dinner. Everything. Balloons, decorations, red and pink cutesy crap, and several expensive gifts including an iPod and a new camera. I went back to her house and decorated everything, transforming her kitchen and living room into what looked like a display at the mall. I even did the rose petals on the bed thing because I was sure my efforts would lead to a romantic evening. I looked up her class schedule to figure out where her class was, we had different majors, and I proceeded to burst in, pretending to be a delivery person. I gave her the roses and a teddy bear in front of her entire class, even going so far as to make her sign the fake delivery invoice. It was her last class of the day, so I knew she'd be heading home afterwards. I raced out of there so I could get there first, change, and start cooking dinner. I got there maybe 20 minutes before she did, and everything was going to plan. She was upset when she walked in the door. "Why didn't you wait for me after class?" she said. I told her I wanted to start dinner before she got home and finish decorating the house. "Oh, I really wanted to go out for dinner tonight. Can't we go out for dinner?" I explained that I was going to make something special at home and had in fact already started cooking. She looked at the table full of presents and the house full of decorations and just sighed, disappointed. I really wanted this to be a special Valentine's Day, just this once. I was really hoping we could have a special day together, but I guess not. In short, spent $800 on Valentine's Day, put on a great show, and it wasn't good enough. Never again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was younger, I worked at Blockbuster. I was the night shift manager, and one night I was working by myself when a customer walks up and handed me a woman's wallet. He says he found it on the ground. I peeked inside to find an ID and membership card so I could look up her account and phone number. Sure enough, she'd been in the store about 30 minutes earlier, so I gave her a call. She seemed pleased on the phone and said she'd be right in. Store policy for something like that was to lock the item in the safe until the customer arrives. I did so and went about my business. About an hour later, the woman comes in and asks for her wallet. I tell her it's going to be 15 minutes as the safe was timed and I asked her to wait. This was apparently unacceptable, and she asked if I could get it faster than that. I told her no and continued helping other customers while she waited. Once the safe beeped, I grabbed her wallet and handed it to her. I had to put a line of customers on hold while I did this because I wanted her out of the store ASAP since she had spent the last 15 minutes fuming and standing right next to my register. As soon as I hand her the wallet, she says, "My money had better be in there." I explained that honestly I had no idea as I didn't open it all the way, as her membership card was on an outer flap. This was one of those larger wallets that was more like a mini purse with lots of flaps and zippers and such. After handing it to her, I asked for the next customer in line to step up and basically tried ignoring her. Unfortunately, she began screaming, "My money is gone! You stole my money!" Which really surprised me as she was a pretty normal-looking soccer mom type. I asked the customer in front of me I'm helping to wait a second and explained to her that the wallet was handed to me and reiterated that I had not personally opened the wallet any further than the first flap. She starts screaming again, saying there were over $200 in it and that she was calling the police. I shrug and tell her to go ahead. At this point, I'm completely satisfied to ignore her. She walks to the back of the store and whips out her cell phone. I continue helping the line as the customers are looking back at this woman as she's loudly calling the cops. Most of the customers got up to the front of the line and went like, "What a witch," and that kind of comment. I just shrugged and smiled. After the line was cleared, the lady came back to the register and told me with a super smug look that the police were on their way. "Okay," I say, and I give her a "I don't give an F" shrug and ignore her while checking in movies. About an hour later, a cop finally enters the store. This lady has waited right next to my register again the entire time, and she starts waving at him and pointing at me the same time. I see the cop and roll my eyes and shake my head. He asks her to repeat her story, and as she's repeating it, he's almost completely ignoring her and watching the football game that we have playing on our direct TV kiosk. After she gets done, he looks at me, rolls his eyes, and asks, "Did you take the money?" "Of course not," I say. "I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do, ma'am," the cop says and leaves the store. As he leaves, he holds the door open for her and tells her to leave if her business is complete. I smiled super big, like a Cheshire cat big, and told her to have a super day as she left. After she left, I bought pizza with the $200 I took. I'm just kidding, but I almost wish that's how the story ended after she embarrassed me like that for close to 2 hours. I helped my workmate move house, hungover after far too much tequila. I moved all of his crap, his boyfriend's and his roommate's stuff, basically myself as they were all useless. Took almost 12 hours. That jerk didn't even buy me a beer, food, or anything all day. Then he fobbed me off when I asked for help to move myself. Then had the nerve to ask for help when he moved out again. I bought my cats some gourmet food and they looked at me like I was trying to poison them. Cretins. Well, on the one hand, I sympathize with you, but on the other hand, you probably should have seen that coming. I love cats, but they are complete jerks. This is one of my favorite stories of instant justice. My mother's friend threw his daughter a birthday party. This was a fairly affluent family, so she got a big party with all of her friends, and this girl got a lot of nice stuff. She got dolls, a dollhouse, various toys, and a frickin' horse. With all of the riding gear and the promise of lessons and everything she could ever need for that horse. This brat got what millions of little girls all over the country dream of, and you know what she did? She flipped the crap out because it was the wrong dollhouse. She got a horse. And she threw a massive, screaming temper tantrum over the enormous dollhouse. Now, I'll digress a little bit and tell you about her father. Her dad came from Africa to the US as a refugee. Most of his friends and family were killed. This guy not only competed in the Olympics, but worked his butt off to become a doctor of some kind. As one might expect, he did not take kindly to his daughter's obvious lack of appreciation for her privileged lifestyle, so he cut that crap right out. He cancelled the party right then. The guests still got to eat cake and keep their party favors on top of an apology for his daughter's behavior. He packed up all of the toys and took them back to the store. He took the horse back and grounded the crap out of his spoiled little girl. In short, guy buys daughter a horse and other stuff, daughter flips out over a dollhouse, and the guy takes everything back. I have quite a few I could tell about my little sister, but I'll stick with 2. My mum bought her numerous laptops, iPhones, and cameras on the condition that she took care of them. Every single one was broken in a month or 2. Bought her a $900 digital SLR that she knows I've been coveting for years because my sister claimed she was going to take a photography course at school. She got the camera, complained that she didn't get any other presents that day, used it for a day and then let it sit around for 6 months. She uses it now for pictures on her Tumblr, but she told my mum she intended to take a photography course and she can only use the damn thing on auto. For Easter, I spent a couple of $100 buying her tons of Hunger Games stuff and random stuff for an Easter basket because I stupidly wanted to do something nice, I guess. I'll just pick random stuff over the course of a few months that I thought she'd like. She was upset that my mum wouldn't be doing baskets anymore because she was 15. She threw a tantrum after she opened everything because Easter sucked because we wouldn't hide Easter eggs for her or hide plastic ones filled with money like her friends' parents did. She's 15 for frick's sake. I haven't gotten her a damn thing since. I bought my mum a MacBook Air to pay her back for years of caring for me, and my sister threw the biggest temper tantrum ever. She clawed at my mum's face and tried to steal her car because it wasn't fair that my mum got something nice for the first time ever. Literally ever. My sister has since accidentally broken her laptop hoping that I'd buy her one too. Not going to ever fricking happen. Whew, sorry, that turned into a bit of a rant. My older sister Amanda is extremely spoiled. My dad practically worships the ground she spits on. Well, she's about 9 years older than me, so of course she was able to do more things. I used to help my mum at a restaurant every day when I was about 5 to 8 years old. Because I was so young, people would give me tips throughout the day. When my mum's shift ended, she'd walk me next door to the bank and I'd deposit my earnings. By the time I was 8, I had a little over $800 saved up. May came around and my sister was going to turn 17. For her birthday, she wanted a crap ton of hairstyling stuff and makeup. Well, my father had other plans. He convinced me into letting him borrow my $800 and combined it with his $500. He then went out and bought a cheap car for $1,000 and used the other $300 for seat covers, new tires, and a new stereo. On May 5th, we gave my sister the car and she threw the biggest witch fit ever. She wanted nothing to do with the car, so she sold it for $700. Dad got his $500 back, Amanda got $200 to spend on hair crap, and I got nothing. Just a rant from an ungrateful jerk. My spouse used to have an old Mercedes E-Class. It was like 1995 or something. He wanted to give it away to my little cousin as a first car because it was safe, reliable, and my little cousin's parents couldn't afford to buy their kid anything big like cars. So we gave her this car and she freaked out like the niece in our first story did. She started going on about how we were going to go out and buy a new one and she wanted a new one too. So my spouse took the keys away from her and gave them to her older brother right in front of her. The reason we didn't give it to him in the first place was because he had an old Honda that he had paid for himself. However, it was falling apart and needed a lot of work to keep it safe. We even volunteered to pay for his insurance in his first year of college just to spite his little sister. Oh, that felt real good. We haven't bought my female cousin anything in over 3 years. We don't even send her a birthday card. If you act like that when someone gives you something, you clearly aren't worthy of anything. I work for a not-for-profit and we have cookouts for people in poverty. They complain so hard that we buy generic soda or don't have, quote, good cheese for their burgers. One time we gave away thousands of pairs of shoes in the city. The "what is this crap" complaints outnumbered the thank yous about 20 to 1. This is from people who came up without shoes to collect them. Well, this is embarrassing. When I was a kid, I was homesick from school one day. My mum told me she'd go rent a movie for me to watch. Expecting a cartoon, I got really excited since I loved cartoons, and back then they were seldom on TV. She came home and had bought a live-action film. I was so disappointed. I cried and yelled for a while and said I didn't want to watch it. She was like, "Fine, I'll watch it on my own." When she started watching it, I pretended not to watch, but I couldn't help not watching it. Turns out it was the best movie I'd ever seen. It made me both appreciate live-action films and convinced me my mum always knew what was best for me. The movie was Back to the Future. What crazy accusation did someone make up about you at work? I'm on the keto diet. That requires me to drink a metric crap ton of water, so I carry around a 1-liter Nalgene bottle at all times. I'm a mid-level manager at a 60-person company. At the end of the workday, on the way out, I pass the water cooler and I fill my bottle up for the commute home. Yesterday, I was doing just that when our office manager walked up and said the following: "You're leaving for the day. Water is for employees to drink when they're working in the office only." I laughed it off, finished filling my bottle and headed home. I genuinely thought she was kidding, or at the very worst having a crappy day and lashing out. She wasn't. Today I get into the office with an email from her to myself, my boss, who's our CEO and founder, and our HR person saying that I'm stealing from the company, that I didn't stop filling my water bottle and immediately apologize when confronted, and that she's officially reporting this behavior and asking to have it documented. Needless to say, we all had a pretty good laugh about it. My boss called me in hysterics and could barely form a sentence, he was laughing so hard. And somebody wrote, "Is proper hydration good for the company?" on my water bottle. Our office manager, however, is just walking by my office and glaring since then. In short, I'm the Daniel Ocean of our office water cooler. Ooh, update. This morning there was a fancy new Nalgene bottle on my desk, and the crazy office manager came by and said that she was having a crazy week and apologized. I showed her this comment, laughs were had, and all is now good in my office world. Time clock thievery while doing volunteer work. It was a simple volunteer gig, no major organization, and nobody was keeping track of hours for anything. It was not court mandated. We were cleaning up at the end of the day and I answered a phone call. The supervisor got all angry and said, "Get off the phone, that's time clock thievery." By God, this man can steal time itself. After working at Subway for 5 years, 3 of those as manager, I was accused of turning off the cameras in the store and getting blazed in the cooler. I quit shortly after. Turned out the owner was trying to set me up to fire me. I once used the phrase, "more than one way to skin a cat," around a manager who'd never heard the phrase. She called me into her office later to ask why I was saying such a disgusting thing, accused me of being a sicko who killed animals, and then threatened to fire me if she heard anything like it ever again. I mean, I would hope that once it was explained that it was a common saying that they might back down, but I guess there are some cat people who would probably be incapable of hearing this without bursting into tears, so who knows. I was working retail at Best Buy at the time and they had me working in MP3 players and cell phones, despite the fact that DVDs and video games were really more my wheelhouse. But I went and worked where they told me and I did my job well. During Christmas season, it got really busy, so everyone was running around helping every department. I was hanging out in my own section when a woman came over, asked me about some headphones, and I helped her. She then asked me if the Dance Dance Revolution Mad Cats match she bought for her daughter was any good, and I asked if she has any of the games. She didn't. I showed her a slightly more expensive but better copy of a Konami mat with a game, and she thanked me and she didn't even know she needed a game with it and went off. My department manager came up behind me, tells me to meet him in the break room in 5 minutes, and rips into me. He says that the department with the best revenue gets bonuses. It's only true for him, by the way, not for the rest of us below him, and tells me off for helping customers in other sections get more expensive things. He says he'd be shocked if I made it past winter. I just say, yes sir, and go back to work. Come January, I get fired by department manager recommendation. So, when you go to Best Buy, know that all the departments have their own agendas with you. I had an employer of mine write me up for stealing trash. In reality, at the end of my shift, one of my duties was to gather all of the trash. Oftentimes, I'd pick through said trash and sort out all the paper, pop cans, and water bottles in our company's recycle bin. We had a special promotion with our trash company in which our company would get money based on the number of pounds we recycled. It ended up being $1,500 per month, and we didn't pay our trash bill. So, long story short, I got a final write-up for stealing company time for sorting our recyclables. So I stopped the following month, and our manager was then angry that she had to pay a trash bill. She called the trash company, and the company told her that the past 2 years she didn't pay for trash because our company would recycle so much, and we'd get a $1,500 check and free trash service. My boss thought that the checks were a bonus for her. Anyhow, the district manager was reviewing the write-ups and saw that I got written up for stealing trash, so he called me up and asked me what was going on. I told him the story about the trash company and their promotion. He congratulated me for a job well done. The next day, he flew in to talk to my manager. He asked her what happened to the $20,000 she got from the trash company. Apparently, she tried to pin it back on me, and our district manager promptly fired her. After escorting her out, he called me into the office. He told me what happened in that meeting and offered me a promotion to assistant manager. I was called a racist because I didn't really talk to or interact with any of my fellow employees beyond what was needed. I had to explain to my boss, who was also black, that I wasn't racist, I just didn't talk to this one girl because she was incredibly annoying. So I got accused of stealing a salad. I worked as a cashier at a grocery store while in high school. Because they'd scheduled me 6.5 hours, I only qualified for a 15-minute break, not a 30-minute one. So I spent the first 8 or so minutes of my break on the phone with a mechanic working out issues with my car. I then ran back to the little cafe near the back of the store that has a salad bar and made a quick salad, which you weigh and price there. By this time, I had about 5 minutes left on my break, and the manager was very strict about not going over your 15 minutes. So I stood at the cafe register for a good minute and no one was to be found. I quickly ate my salad, then took the sticker up to the front registers to pay for the $1.99 salad. I go back on the clock and about 20 minutes later I was called into the office. They say a situation has occurred, but don't tell me what. They said they're sending me home for the day. So I came back in the next day for my shift and they called me into the office again. Waiting for me in the office is the store manager, the assistant manager, the office manager, the cafe manager, and my shift supervisor. Mind you, I'm a 16-year-old kid at their first job who had never been in any sort of trouble before. They accuse me of stealing the salad because, despite purchasing the salad, as our records do indicate, you consumed the salad before the purchase. I explained to them how the cashier at the cafe was nowhere to be found, and how if I wanted to eat during my break at that point, I would have had to eat it back in the cafe and then pay for it up front. They tell me to go home and that they'll be contacting me tomorrow regarding if I keep my job or not. I left in tears, but then got really angry at the severe overreaction, so I came back in an hour later and told them that I quit. I worked in a souvenir shop at an amusement park. It was the 4th of July, one of the busiest days because of the park's fireworks show, and we were also understaffed. The shop was just inside the gate, so we would get swamped just before closing as people bought the stuff they didn't want to walk around with all day. I was left alone in the shop just before closing time, running the cash register as people flowed in. It was utter chaos. While closing out the register that night, I noticed that a large stuffed animal had been stolen. The manager couldn't fathom that one person manning a swamped store couldn't prevent theft because not all of the displays are within sight of the register. I think it must have been a team effort, with 1 or 2 people getting my attention in one area while the other one walked off with the toy. But I didn't say that because I didn't really know how or when it happened. The butthole accused me of being in on it and looking the other way while a friend stole it so we could profit later. I didn't even know what to say. I was 17, it was my first job, and I cried for days under the assumption that every job I'd ever hold down would be like that one. Don't those things just have a gigantic markup but cost the shop almost nothing to buy in? I don't know for sure, but I think most amusement park giant toys are cheap as all heck, although that might just be the ones you win in the rigged games. I used to work at a retail store and I had a beard. One day my boss told me to get rid of my beard, so I came back the next day with a mustache. I was then told I had an attitude problem. I had a regional manager do that to me once. He was in our store almost every day and saw me growing the beard and never said a word. Then once, when I was in trouble for not driving 40 miles during a tornado alert to see a training video, he ordered me to shave off my beard as, "I have a no beards policy." When I pointed out other store managers had beards, his response was, "They had beards when I hired them." My boss thought I was goofing off in the restroom. For a few months there, he wouldn't let me flush the toilet until he came in and made sure I actually used it. I would certainly call that a hostile work environment. I'm a freaking grown man and there's no way I'm going to let anyone inspect my duties like I'm some kind of toddler. Are you a grown man because you just used the word duty? I digress. Back when I was in high school, I worked for my town's parks department. One time, my boss, who was a total sleazeball creep to every girl there, and hated me for not being female mostly, he calls me into his office. While there, he accused me of stealing a $3 check and then says that I have to be let go. I tell him point blank that if I was to steal from the department, it would be something a lot more than a measly $3 check. What the heck would I do with that anyway? Later on, I find out from a friend of mine that he found the check underneath his desk, and then a month later someone finally reported to him for his behavior with the women, and he got fired too. Karma is a witch, yo. Last night, my manager called me stupid and uneducated for not cheating a customer out of $15 due to a computer error. She thought it was obvious that I should lie about the error and garner another whopping $15 for the struggling hospitality industry. Today I'm going in for a meeting to get scolded for not lying, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to burst into tears. Screw that. Hold strong knowing that you did the right thing. You saved a person $15 that they shouldn't have had to spend. That's 2 hours of minimum wage where I live. You made the company look great, and I wouldn't doubt that you just secured a lifelong customer. You did the right thing. Don't let F-ups bring you down. You have the right to have a witness present for that conversation. Be sure to ask your manager to reiterate their exact words from the night before and write down everything that's said. Assure your boss that your human resources department will be informed of every detail. See how far your boss takes the conversation afterwards. Don't allow someone to treat you with disrespect because they have a position of authority over you. They have bosses too. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My first job with the state was awful. My supervisor was an idiot in every sense of the word. I remember once I was called into a meeting with our bureau chief. He asked us some questions about office matters, and my supervisor flat out made up lies about me that were completely against my character. I couldn't hold my frustration in and I blew up at her. I told my bureau chief that I wasn't there to play childish games, and then walked out of the meeting. I did end up winning that one and got a promotion that paid twice as much as that terrible supervisor. It was one of those awesome revenge moments where nobody got hurt. In one of my darker life periods, I was doing part-time tech support for a dinky computer shop here in town. The owner was a pill-popping nutjob that kept a loaded gat in a drawer in the front desk and regularly cheated his customers. Anyway, I'm working one day, and one of the other techs who'd been there forever and a half tells me to go install a modem in some guy's computer. I'm shaking my head because this is 2009, and I can't believe anyone would be requesting a modem. I ask him if he's sure before I go out there. He said he was. So I went out, and sure enough, he doesn't need a modem at all. He needs a wireless card or adapter. I call, go back to the store, get the card, head back to the customers, install it, head back, and yell at the guy for being an idiot, as common sense would tell anyone reasonably competent that he didn't need a modem. Long story short, next week the boss came in and fired me because the other guy made up some absolute crap about me drilling a hole in a motherboard to fix a PC, which made no sense whatsoever. On my way out, I rolled my eyes and said, fine, whatever, grabbed my stuff and left. The owner freaks out and follows me into the parking lot, yelling and screaming and ranting and raving and trying to pick a physical fight. I just calmly walked to my car, went home and had a beer. I found out later that shortly thereafter the other guy was busted for fraud and the owner went bankrupt, shortly before taking way too many substances for one person and self-deleting. When I worked at Circuit City, I had an 80GB iPod that my dad had given me because he no longer needed it. It was practically brand new. Even when I first plugged it into my computer, it came up as Richard's iPod. Well, one day it was in my purse that I kept under my counter while I was working. It went missing. I couldn't understand how it had gotten stolen. It had been one of the slowest days ever. Nonetheless, I was pretty frickin' bummed out about it. This happened during a time where the case we kept iPods in was broken, and it was horribly easy to steal them, and many had gone missing. Fast forward to a few weeks later, my coworker told me that my recently left for another job department manager thought I was the one stealing iPods, and that he got into my purse when I wasn't looking and took it to check the serial number, but never gave it back because I was flipping out and causing a bit of a scene walking around asking everyone if they'd seen anyone take it. I was frickin' livid, I can tell you. Folks, if you're so afraid of admitting that you're wrong that you're going to straight up just commit theft, then you really need to take a good look at yourself and head to a therapist's office. That is, after you give back the 80GB iPod that in the late 2000s was worth an ungodly amount of money, right? Several years ago, I was working for a sporting goods store as the customer service desk guy. Mostly what I did was returns and some special stuff with Ticketmaster and hunting and fishing licenses. While it wasn't a glamorous job, I did like it because I'm an outdoorsy guy, so the clientele were fun to talk to. One day we were informed we were getting a new general manager as the old one, who was decent but distant, was being transferred. The new manager was a raving, harpy, butthole C-word. She enjoyed making employees upset, didn't give a flying frick about our customers, did nothing to improve anything about the store, and kept the other managers in her office with endless meetings about, quote, improving the store. After a few months of this bullcrap and seeing some of the high school girls hired to work in shoes crying after her ranting at them, I had enough. I wrote a rather eloquent letter to corporate about her behavior and actions and had several employees sign it. 2 days later, several regional higher-ups arrived and proceeded to chew her out big time. She was suspended for 2 weeks and told that if the store didn't improve within the next quarter, she'd be fired. But that's just the beginning of the story, dear listener. I thought I'd won. But no, I had not. Apparently she found out it was me who wrote the letter. She probably got told by one of the other employees, I'm not so sure. And she was out for revenge. She got into the computer system and started to fake records showing I'd been selling gift cards to myself, pocketing the cash difference and then buying merchandise with those cards. Mostly candy and pop and small stuff, which she was probably pocketing since our counts weren't ever off. She then called in loss prevention, who weren't doing their jobs too well, because they didn't look closely at the files and their last edited dates. Yay for Windows NT Office. Because they believed her and called in the county sheriffs. 2 deputies came in, looked over the evidence. To their credit, they asked, "Are you sure, and can you explain this?" several times, and I got the feeling they were unsure about the whole mess. Nice guys too. They offered to take me out through the back instead of parading me past customers. They let me have a cigarette before we left and were generally courteous and respectful. Anyway, I ended up getting arrested on felony theft charges. Taken to jail, booked, the whole shebang. I was in tears for pretty much 3 days. But I knew this was bullcrap, so I went to my parents to help hire a lawyer for me. I told him the whole story and said under no circumstances were we pleading out to anything. He said, okay, and set up a meeting with the DA to talk about motions and such. When we arrived, the DA was all smiles and very polite. He informed me that the paperwork wasn't quite done yet, but they were dropping all charges and filing false report charges against my old manager. The investigators had looked over the evidence and found that A. the files for almost 3 months' worth of thefts had been edited on 2 days, neither of which I'd been present for, but that she had, and B. they'd all been edited from her computer, a computer I didn't have access to, and C. several of the thefts occurred on days when I was in the system as being out of state on vacation. I felt a lot happier after that and felt even better when my ex-boss was found to have fled the state and checked herself into a mental hospital for a nervous breakdown. She was eventually brought back, charged and convicted. Last I saw, she was an assistant manager at a gas station, while I'm now a federal firefighter and in school to become a police officer, and I'll make damn sure I read out every bit of evidence put in front of me. It's only after I saw her pumping gas that I could claim victory over her. I worked in retail as a cashier at a pet store for a long time, and occasionally when there was nothing going on, I'd just grab a couple of tennis balls and juggle them to keep myself amused. I'm pretty good at it. I can do 3 in all sorts of ways without looking at it or thinking about it, so I converse with customers perfectly normally when needed to, and most of them find it funny. If I suspected otherwise, I'd stop before they even made it close to conversation range, and I'd done it long enough that I was a pretty good judge of that kind of thing. Cue a day such as that, I was bored and juggling while I watched the front door. A family comes in with little kids, they laugh at the juggling man, and come to talk to me for a little while about reptiles. And juggling, of course. While I tried to teach one of their sons, who was 5 or 6 years old, how to juggle because he asked me to. Good times were had by all. They walk off and do their shopping with their little son trying to juggle the mini tennis balls that I gave him. Immediately, I got called into the back by the assistant manager, with another manager present as a witness, I guess, who decides he's going to rip me a new one for being disrespectful to the customers by juggling and not giving them my full attention. I respectfully, and perhaps sarcastically, no promises, disagree. And when he looks to the other manager in the room to back him up, you could just tell the guy was completely uninterested in getting involved, and he basically had nothing bad to say. The assistant manager continues to lay into me a bit more, says he's going to work with me on not being disrespectful like that, and if it continued would have to talk about my employment. I leave. Months later, the new store manager gets hired, walks to the front with the assistant manager, and sees me juggling. The assistant manager gets the look that he's about to rip me a new one, but the store manager laughs, compliments me on my juggling, grabs his own tennis balls, and starts juggling as well. Oh boy, the look on the assistant manager's face was priceless. A year after I started working for a company as a graphic designer, it turned out I was also the marketing and web design departments as well, my wife got pregnant with our first child. This was an office mostly filled with middle-aged women. I was in my mid to late 20s, and they were all excited and even threw us a baby shower. All went well and my son was born, and I took 2 weeks vacation time to be with my wife and child. 2 weeks that I'd saved up, by the way, not even parental leave. I came back and my boss was suddenly very aloof and non-communicative with me, where previously she and I were pretty close. This went on for several months until I learned that budget cuts have eliminated my position. Effective in 6 months' time, I found out. Through my coworkers, I found out that my boss was angry I had had a baby and wasn't dedicated to the cause. She was also at the budget meeting, and initially there were no cuts to our division, but she threw me under the bus, saying my work was non-essential. So here I am with a young family and staring down the barrel of unemployment. Turns out, though, that another company had been following my work and were eager to sign me on. Needless to say, I didn't do crap for the next 6 months, and I'm now happy at my current position and making more moolah to boot. The company is now in the crapper, and I poached one of their biggest clients on the way out. In short, I wasn't part of my ex-boss's fascist view of the future since I started a family. When was the cringe so strong that you barely survived? My sister went to an 18th birthday with 3 friends where over 120 people had RSVP'd and only the host, his parents, and his girlfriend were there. She was telling me about it today, and I couldn't think about anything except how horrible high school people can be. So here's the story. This guy set up a Facebook event for this party at this big hall, and out of the 700 plus people invited, 120 people RSVP'd. So it's not like nobody knew about it. Considering the amount of people that knew about it and come, even if they hadn't clicked attending, was the fact that this guy booked a massive hall that could cater for such a large event. This cost him around $1,500, which included food and security and stuff. Then he decided instead of using an iPod, which would probably get lost or stolen, he'd hire a DJ. That cost $400. For all of this, the host had spent months working overtime, so he was actually able to afford it and hold, quote, the best party ever. Come the night of the party, weeks of preparation, money and organization, this party is expected to go off. My sister headed off to this massive venue, fashionably late as well, and nobody else was there. Much to their surprise, it's just an empty hall with lights going on and a DJ doing his thing. Then she finds the host and asks the normal questions, where is everyone and stuff like that. He's as baffled as my sister was. Not even his best mates had shown up, which was the most surprising part. Now, this is just the most gut-wrenching part of the whole thing. He then calls his friends. He asks them, where the hell are you guys? And obviously, on loudspeaker, an uproar of laughter comes from the person speaking, and you can also hear it in the background. He starts crying and everything, absolutely devastated about what has happened. He's out of pocket $1,900 at least, and knowing that all his friends possibly organized a boycott for his event. When I told this story, I couldn't stomach how harsh and horrible people can be. I'd never have thought this could have happened, especially on such a large scale as this. For my high school's 5-year anniversary, one enterprising student made a Facebook group and went through the yearbook, adding everybody that he could possibly find. About 630 of the roughly 700 students from our graduating class joined the group and started in on how everyone was doing, where everyone was living and stuff. When he sent out invites to get together, about 150 people said yes and 300 or so said maybe. The guy who organized it rented out a private room at a bowling alley, paid for a bartender, and got a ridiculous amount of food and such, as well as having all 4 yearbooks and putting together a DVD of random videos from sporting events, plays, funny skits from the school news, everything. This guy went all out. On the day of the reunion, 5 people came. The guy who organized it and his girlfriend, who wasn't even in our class, myself and a friend, and one random person who I recognized but never spoke to, and another guy who actually worked at the bowling alley. Quite possibly the saddest thing I've ever seen. The look of defeat on the guy's face was crushing. I've never felt such vicarious humiliation in my life. We ended up just getting drunk and bowling a few games before the black cloud of shame left everyone silent, and my friend and I left abruptly. And to Alan, if you read this, everyone in our class was a butthole anyway. Sorry, bro. Oh boy. Is this going to be an entire video of people being humiliated and financially broken because people ditch their parties? Because I'm not sure I can survive that. Oh, thank God, the next one is only about grievous bodily harm. I decided that I'd go to my junior prom, even though I had no date and all of about 3 friends at the time, none of whom were going. I mowed lawns to rent a tux, and since my dad was working, I started walking towards my school the night of the prom. As I'm walking down the sidewalk, a group of guys drives past me in a convertible going the opposite direction, and they ask me if I'm going to the prom. I recognize a couple of them as the popular kids, so I say yes. They said they'd swing around and give me a ride. They made a U-turn, and I see one begin to stand up in the back seat of the car. The top was down. It was beginning to get dark, and I couldn't see too well, but I thought I saw him make some kind of motion like he was saying, "Come on!" And then I came to consciousness in an ambulance. After I get as much of my bearings as I was going to, I freaked right the frick out. There was blood on my tuxedo and EMTs standing next to me. I asked them in a confused teenager sort of way what the actual F happened and where was I. They told me someone had reported seeing me lying on the sidewalk, unconscious and bleeding. I was dumbstruck. I said I don't remember anything other than waiting to get a ride from someone. There was apparently a can full of beer sitting very close by which they believed I'd been hit in the head with. Then it all came together for me in one very terrible instant. I was struck paralyzed with fear as my brain pieced together what must have happened. When I saw that guy stand up in the back seat making a hand motion, he must have been throwing something at me. In the darkness I didn't see it coming and was most likely completely unprepared when it hit me. I must not have even known what hit me. They said I was curled in the fetal position when they found me, which I don't remember going into. I remember nothing from the time, just the car coming towards me and then waking up in the ambulance. The police took the can as evidence and apparently it had blood of mine on it and was dented from having hit my head. Of course, every person in that car covered for one another and as such there weren't arrests or disciplines of any kind. I knew it was them though. That's the only thing that made sense to me more than 10 years later. I never went to another prom. 9th birthday, I invited my entire grade. My mum, my little sister and I had spent a week making a piñata by hand. We were living in extreme poverty. I got thrift store toys for presents. No complaints from me though. I loved the thrift store and they were still toys. We didn't have a lot to eat sometimes. I was later put in foster care, but that's another story. But my mum had saved up to have snacks and such, and I remember that she put so much work into making it a great party. I knew my best friend had some kind of family event that weekend, so she couldn't come, so we had plans to have a sleepover the next weekend. We sat in the yard waiting for 2 hours, and nobody came. My little sister and I ended up just taking turns hitting the piñata ourselves. I wanted to cry, but my mum already looked so sad and I felt too guilty to let the tears come. Worst birthday ever. Just last night I was forced to go watch a friend of a friend's band play some crappy gig at a hole-in-the-wall bar. They went on late after another band had already played and the audience just kept dwindling in size. It was pretty excruciating. It took all of my willpower not to look like I was in agony. Afterwards, we all had to pretend that they'd rocked out and that we were impressed. I mean, he looked so happy. We couldn't ruin it for him. I used to work in the showroom at Chuck E. Cheese when I was in high school. My primary job was to throw birthday parties, and throw birthday parties I frickin' did. I made damn sure that every kid there had the greatest birthday party of all time. I worked the 4th of July one year, and we had just one party that day. I got to work on it. The RSVP number was fairly small, like 5 people or so, but it got worse than that. It was just the father and son. The mum and mum's family were proud residents of the state penitentiary in Oklahoma or something. Dad got custody and moved with the son to Tennessee and had his party there. He invited a few friends, but none of them came, so it was just the father and son at the birthday table. They weren't very well off and they bought the bare-bones party option. I asked around to all of my co-workers and threw in about $40 of my own money to make sure that they had the best birthday bash ever. It was an hour from close and nobody was there, so all of the employees just started partying with them. We made them 10 pizzas, and the kid got to pick whatever toppings he wanted. We then gave him about 500 tokens. We played and partied for 2 hours and then put on the show after closing. After the show, my boss brought out an Xbox and the kid got to play Xbox on the giant TVs in the showroom. It was close to midnight when they left. My boss brought fireworks and beer and all of us employees were going to raise heck in the parking lot. But we decided to invite the kid too. He got to shoot off bottle rockets and Roman candles and whatnot, and his dad got a beer out of it. Later, Dad brings the employees aside and starts crying about how awesome of a party it was. I worked at Chuck E. Cheese's for 2 years and hated most of it, but that night was one of the best of my entire life. I think the total pot on them was close to $200. My boss matched my donation and everybody else pitched in a few bucks here and there. I haven't seen the kid or the father since, but I do know that the father wrote an email to customer service and we got fancy pins in our lanyards. There was this hospitality hero competition, and if the managers ever caught you doing something nice for the customers, you got a slice of pizza on the chart. 4 slices of pizza and like 15 pizzas got you to the hospitality hero level, where you had this awesome pin with Chuck on it. I think all of us working that night got one. Yay. You know, this might actually be the most wholesome story to come out of the slave pits of Charles Entertainment Cheese. There was 100% less pee, duty, and throw-up than most of those stories have, and it didn't even involve physical violence. Well done, everybody. You and your co-workers seem like good eggs. For my 20th birthday party, I was going to have a big barbecue. I bought the meat, the cake, the corn, everything. I invited 50 people, and not one of them showed up. Not one person. This sort of thing also happened to an acquaintance of mine. The kid was really nerdy, but didn't really have any self-awareness, so he didn't really have friends. He organized a big going-away party our senior year. A friend and I knew what was going to happen, so out of pity we decided to go. Big surprise, no one else was there. Just a big empty house with a few bowls of chips all set up and the guy sobbing in the corner. We stood there awkwardly for a few minutes. It was miserable. So we ran back home, grabbed our laptops, ran back and had an impromptu mini LAN party. We actually had a blast and the host ended up having a great time. The party ended up lasting about 24 hours. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I graduated from high school 3 years ago, I wasn't invited to a single party afterwards. Now, the optimist in you might think, oh, people must not have had any parties. Everyone gets invited to graduation events. Well, my dear internet friends, the sad truth is that there was one. It was held at a local country club. There were over 200 people in attendance for a graduation event of my class of 192. And how do I know this, you might ask? I was present when everyone else was invited. I was watching the computer when the Facebook event creator, who was our class president, sent out the Facebook invites and I watched her uncheck my name and 1 or 2 other kids' names before sending it. I was also present when the paper invites were given out. The school gave permission to hand them out in our homeroom. I was the only one that wasn't given one in my homeroom. My school doesn't have official graduation events outside of the usual honors day, commencement and such. Yep, people suck. I went to a surprise party where I was the only non-family member there, and I didn't even know the girl that well. Turns out, her friends were buttholes, but she's an awesome person and it made her feel better than no one being there otherwise, so I don't really regret it. On my 21st birthday, I brought a few of my best friends to Six Flags, bought their tickets because they were having a hard time finding work, and spent the day having fun with them. We planned to leave early and go back to my place to celebrate turning 21 with some drinking. But as I was driving them back, they got a call and were all invited to a party except for me. So they all had me drop them off, except for one guy who just went home and left me to be alone as they went to a party. So I spent the night drinking alone as a wreck. I now can't stand the thought of celebrating my own birthday. I should make it clear that these were friends I knew for over 10 years, and this was the only time they ever really behaved like really bad friends. I'm still in rough waters with them, but I went with the everyone gets one mentality. If they ever pull crap like that again, they're gone. And I don't do them many favors these days, and none of them involving money. My cousin's wedding was sad. Rented hall, catered, DJ. Maybe 15 people showed up. Invited over 150, mostly family. You know, the same sad party story that's going around a lot happened to me in elementary school as well. My parents moved us around a lot, so I wasn't able to keep friends for a long time. I moved to a new school and decided that the best way to make friends would be to invite a whole bunch of girls to my birthday party. My mum put this whole thing together and only 2 of them showed up. I was devastated. I asked one of the girls from school why they didn't come and she said, "My mum told me it looked like a child made the invitation, so I couldn't go." Which, I am a child. Needless to say, I wasn't very socially graceful after that. Wow, this might be the most depressing bunch of stories I've ever read at 3 in the morning. Yep, my social anxiety is coming back just from reading these answers. My mother frequented a 50-plus age group chat room on WBS, which was once known as the IRSociety.com. This was during the mid-90s. The regulars eventually started organizing meetups, for which they'd later expound upon the great time that was had and wonderful people who met in person. One such regular was a quadriplegic gentleman whose personal aide would type for him. He'd been to a few local meetups, and everyone really seemed to admire his personality and spirit. He was on a fixed income and saved for nearly a year to fly, without his aide, to a meetup on the US East Coast. Only, when he was wheeled out to the terminal, nobody was waiting for him, and nobody ever came. He spent 10 hours sitting alone, helpless, and hoping the alleged woman who had invited him and promised to host him at her house was just very late before finally getting help from a passerby. Somebody even had the heart to help the guy try calling the listed names in the phone book, but to no avail. He showed up online again a week later, disheartened and angry that he'd let some cold-hearted troll get the better of him under multiple screen names and personalities. Even at the age of 14, when I didn't give 2 craps about chatroom drama, my faith in humanity died a little bit hearing that story. I threw a toga party, and while 300 people said they were going to come, only 20 of them actually did, and one of them crapped himself halfway through the party. Let's spin this tale around. 3rd grade. Teacher takes the whole class aside and asks, "All of you were invited to Charles' birthday party and none of you went. What happened?" At which point it became clear that I was the only kid that Charles hadn't invited. The joke was on him because I would have been at that party. Poor kid was at Chuck E. Cheese all by himself. Wait, so not only was Chucky chucking a party at Chuck E. Cheese, he never chucked an invite your way. What a chuck! Although one has to feel bad for him. Hopefully all the ones who never turned up got food poisoning and chucked their guts up. In Spanish culture, it's tradition to have a quinceañera. I didn't want to have one, but my mum insisted on having it either way. So she decided to have it in the house, right? It's not very big in my house, and she'd already invited the family and close friends from out of state, out of the country even. So my mum limited me to inviting 5 friends, but she got to invite all the people she wanted. So we were expecting more than 40 people to show up. Maybe 6 came. 2 of my friends and 4 family members which lived in the city. The presents were a card with $5 and some cheap perfume. But I don't resent that last one because it was with very good intentions from a very sweet, poor old lady. I was in a super poofy dress for hours and heels that were killing me, while pretty much everyone else was in more or less semi-casual attire. On top of it all, it was raining, and it was on my actual day of birth. What bites the most was the following year when we did it for my sister. She invited the same people, but she decided to have it in a rented space, which I'd suggested to my mum when she had mine, but she said it just wouldn't work out. She spent almost 6 times the money on my sister's and even got a DJ and a lavish cake. Almost everyone except for a few came, and there were about 105 people invited. The same people who didn't turn up for mine turned up for my sister. Everyone was all fancy and it was organized, not a complete mess. The presents were good makeup, good perfume, and about $600 cash in cards, and some shoes and clothes. Needless to say, after that event I felt like crap and felt like there is definitely a favorite in the family. On my 12th birthday, I told my parents that I'd pay for my whole party, and I did. And it was awesome. Well, it would have been if anyone else but my best friend and brother showed up. So there I was with my best friend and brother at a private laser tag room, stuffing our faces with party food and stuff like that, when my mum called one of my other friends' mums, and the kid picked up and just started laughing. I cried in the toilets, but my best friend cheered me up. I got a job and used all of my spare time to pay for that. It was a $700 party. All of that money was down the drain, and I even did my homework in school at lunch. After that, my parents took me to the pound and I took home a puppy, so I guess he made everything much better. And Tommy, I know you live online, you troll, and if you're hearing this, I hate you for telling everyone else not to come. And to Lachlan and Ash, thanks for being the only true friend, Ash, and Lachlan, thanks for being an awesome brother. I went to a costume party. It was not a costume party. I've resolved that if this ever happens to me, I'm just going to simply act normal, and when people ask me why I'm wearing a costume, stare at them quizzically and ask, "Costume?" When I was in primary school, about 6 or 7 years old, this guy invited all 30 of the people in our class to his birthday. I didn't know him very well, so asked everyone else if they were going, and they said that they were. So the day of the party, nobody else was there except him, his cousin, and his parents. No one else showed up at all. But it was their loss because there was a crap ton of pizza and an endless supply of junk food for us. The guy who threw the party became my best friend and still is 16 years later. I have a heart warmer for all of you to make up for all these tragic stories, although it starts with a snub. I have a friend, let's call him Jed, who went to a high school leavers party. This guy was given a bad roll of the dice when it came to certain genes. He was unusually short, getting plump, had glasses, wasn't great in the looks department, and had a bit of a geeky aspect going on. But all in all, he was a very likable guy if you weren't shallow as F, and I've had many good times with him, even though side by side we look like the main characters in the film Twins. Jed, if you're listening to this, by the way, hi, you can probably tell who I am. Anyway, Jed was invited to this leavers party, hosted by this chick who was hot. A star pupil, basically the real-life equivalent of the movie Prom Queen, only stereotypically shallow and witchy. We'll call her Kez. Not normally socially popular at that point, Jed was getting on fine with the other guests, even though he wasn't great friends with many of them, and the guy he was getting on particularly well with was the brother of the hostess. Anyway, long story short, at one point, as Jed was going to get a drink or more snacks or something, Kez turned around, spotted him, and in a move straight out of some cheap cheerleader movie, made a disgusted face and said, "Oh, who invited him?" Loud enough for Jed and several others to hear. The feeling of embarrassment must have been sickening for him. I wasn't there, or I'd have told her where to shove those words and left with him, but he had nobody backing him up at the time. It kind of wrote off his night. So he went back to the crowd he'd been hanging with and started to diplomatically say his farewells to the people he'd been talking to, reckoning the night wasn't going to get any better. Some of the people he was saying goodbye to were surprised he was leaving so early, and so suddenly, as they'd been having a good night together. They didn't know what had just happened. And one of the people who was curious was the brother of Kez, that witchy hostess. He saw that Jed looked a little upset and asked what was wrong, so Jed told him. The guy listened, looked over at his sister, who seemed to be looking back at him uncomfortably. The guy asked if Jez could stay while he sorted something out, but Jed said he needed to leave. The guy shook Jed's hand and apologized profusely on behalf of his sister, and said that Jed would be missed. Jed went into the hall and got his coat. He put on his shoes and opened the front door. He turned back to give a final wave to the people at the party and was treated to the sight of Kez, the hostile hostess, and her brother standing in a corner. Kez's brother was clearly angry and giving Kez a real piece of his mind. Kez was bright red with embarrassment and openly crying while her friends took their turn being frozen with sympathetic shame for the second time that night. From what I know of Kez, it was long overdue. In short, nerdy friend of mine gets rudely snubbed at high school leavers party by the hostess. Hostess gets humiliated for her attitude in front of everyone by her own brother. When did you realize your brain's autopilot was a complete idiot? I was getting ready for work and had a contact lens in one hand and a vitamin in the other. I popped the contact in my mouth and washed it down with a glass of water. I'm sure the stomach acid took care of it? When I was around 13 or 14, I woke up in the middle of the night in my own bed and room and thought to myself, I need to go home before my parents realize I'm not there. So I sneak out of the house, part of me obviously aware that my parents were sleeping and that I needed to be quiet, and walked a block away. Then I realized I'd been in my own room and just thought, what the hell am I doing? So I walked back and snuck back into bed. So weird. Painting a picture, took a drink from the paintbrush water instead of my coffee. Swished my mouthwash for a solid 30 seconds and then just spit it up on the floor where I was standing. Last night I picked up a box of cereal to put it away. I ended up accidentally taking it with me to bed. Ooh, you two have fun there? I once got my car impounded via brain autopilot. I lived across the street from a gas station and didn't drive very often. Once I was filling up, went inside to buy something, forgot I was getting gas and just walked home. A few days later, I reported my car stolen since I couldn't find it in my apartment garage. About a month later, I got a call from the cops saying my car had gone up for auction, and only then was it discovered it had been reported stolen. I had to pay about $1,500 in impound fees to get it back. Definitely one of the dumbest things I've ever done. The night before my very first day at work, where I was to bring my own lunch, I got all of the ingredients out to make a sandwich for tomorrow, and immediately after I made it, I walked into the living room, turned on the TV, and ate it. You know, the two that come to mind are while playing Xbox, I got up to get a drink, then sat back down and couldn't find my freaking controller. I was tearing cushions apart, looking under stuff, looking in drawers. Turns out I took a soda out of the fridge and put the controller in the spot I took it from. The other one happened the other day. I drove home from work, parked, went upstairs, opened the door, and started to take off my shirt. Then I remembered it was the middle of my shift and I hadn't left to go home, but just to go buy a drink. Vigorously picking my nose while holding a cigarette and driving, I crammed a lit cigarette up my nose. Oh my God! Kind of a miracle you didn't crash your car. Well, with any luck, you might have put yourself off two bad habits at once, because there'd definitely be a negative association with both of those activities from then on in. I was jogging late at night. A guy reached out his hand in front of me as I passed. I high-fived him. Turns out he was hailing a taxi. I rubbed aftershave in my hair and then put gel on my face. The worst part was that after I put the aftershave in my hair, I laughed at myself, thought, frick, what was all that about? And then I added the hair gel to my skin. I had a very long day of computer drafting. Think like 12 plus hours sitting and staring at 0.5mm lines, and I got really lost. So I asked the person next to me what the heck I did wrong, because they seemed like they'd absolutely have the explanation. I got most of the way through the answer before I realized not only had I asked my frazzled reflection a question, but I'd also calmly and matter-of-factly responded. I went home after that. Applying deodorant on my armpit with my shirt still on. I meant to put a brand new roll of toilet paper on the roll and instead just plopped it in the toilet. When I was in high school and living on the family farm, I used to feed the horses and barn cats every morning. Waking up at 6 a.m. for this as a 16-year-old guaranteed that I was half asleep while I did this chore. So I grabbed the food like I always did, walked to the table where my cat's bowl was, like I always did, and poured some in. My cat always jumped up on the table right away to start eating it, and one morning, as something jumped up in front of me, I absent-mindedly petted it, as usual. The hair felt a little rough, so I looked down, and instead of my friendly orange cat, there was a skunk, just chilling out there eating the cat food while I pet its back. My uncle has a similar story. After a long night of hosting a barbecue with friends, he's sitting out in his yard just looking at the stars. The dog was wandering around and he called her over. She doesn't come at first, but he calls her a few more times and she makes her way over. He reaches down to pet her and notices something off for a moment. Instead of her fluffy, curly fur, it was rough. He looks down and realizes he's been calling and petting a raccoon. He says the raccoon was giving him the look of, "Hey man, why did you stop?" As a teenager, I worked at McDonald's. My McDonald's was 24 hours, and during the summer, I worked the overnight shift. My sleep schedule would get all messed up. My parents woke me up for dinner one evening. I zombie walked to the table and sat down. My dad asked me to say grace. I bowed my head and said, "Thank you for choosing McDonald's. Might I take your order?" I turned around and went back home because I forgot my car keys. I was driving. Tried to turn the sun off. I had a bad hangover, opened my back door, felt for the light switch. There was no light switch, the light was day. I recently spent 10 minutes on the phone with State Farm trying to pull up my policy, getting increasingly annoyed at the fact they couldn't find my policy number. Then I remembered, I have Progressive. I've never had State Farm in my life. I used to work at McDonald's drive-thru, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, so I'd been hardwired to say, "Welcome to McDonald's, how can I help you today?" Every single time I heard the headset beep. Straight up Pavlovian. One day, there was this particularly wily fly that was always just a second ahead of me. I became very focused on killing this fly. I don't know how many times I said it before a coworker finally stopped laughing long enough to tell me, but it turns out I'd been saying, "Welcome to McDonald's, how can I kill you today?" to every car in the drive-thru. Not one customer even paused or acknowledged the fact that Ronald McDonald had threatened their lives with murder. They just wanted their goddamn nuggets. I worked at Sears. During a transaction one time, a guy was paying with a chip card when he asked me what time the store closed. I tried to say, "You can remove your card," and "The store closes at 9" both at once. It simultaneously resulted in, "You can remove your clothes." I drove 20 minutes to my old house after I moved. I was just zoning out. The first day I was in the new place, I ended up at the old building, and it took me 7 or 8 swipes to figure out why my keycard wasn't letting me in. Once I was laying in bed, very tired, watching TV. All of the characters on the show piled into a car together, and I thought for a second, "Oh, I have to put my seatbelt on," before realizing I was safely in bed and nowhere near a car. I drove to work and realized when I got to the parking lot that I'd forgot to drop the kids off at school. The kids knew this too and stayed quiet, thinking they'd get to miss school. I love those sneaky little jerks. I made the best chicken stock ever, lovingly simmered for 24 hours. Then, without thinking, I put the colander in the sink and tipped the stock down the drain, saving the scraps. I cried. I did this exact same thing with some awesome pineapple cider I'd made, after I added the rum. Good rum. I also cried. I'm a barista and I caught myself trying to pour coffee into a cup sleeve, not even attached to a cup. Ouchies, scorched feet. Also, that's hilarious for any customers watching. I mean, you work in a coffee shop and are clearly just not a fan of your own product because you, my friend, seem uncaffeinated as all heck. I've thrown laundry detergent in the dryer on multiple occasions. I'm also used to starting the morning coffee for the whole office at 6 a.m. in the morning. One time I was late and I autopiloted to the kitchenette. I tossed out a pot of freshly made coffee and started another one. But the worst autopilot I've seen wasn't even my own. It had to be when an ex-girlfriend's dad dropped off my ex's kid at my house. I'd only met the dad a couple of times before. He just drove up to my driveway, let the kid out, waved at me, and drove off. After an awkward phone call, we ended up getting pizza and hanging out until the ex got off work to pick her son up. I dropped my pants when going through TSA. For those who fly in the super early morning, it can be rough. I purposefully didn't drink coffee so that I could sleep on the plane. I was on the security line and did the normal routine of taking stuff out of my pockets and putting them in my laptop bag. Then, off with the shoes, placed on top of my luggage, then off comes the belt as usual. Then, of course, when you take off your belt, you take off your pants. No. Damn it. I put them back on and what the frick for a moment as I finished up in security. Luckily, not that many people fly at like 4:30 a.m. Trying to get into a random person's car because I thought it was my friend's. The person whose car I was attempting to break into was very terrified. Once I watched a guy get into a car, close the door, fumble with the steering wheel, open the door, step out, and look at the car for a few seconds, then realize his car was parked right next to it. Gold Grand Am versus a silver Taurus. It was 2 a.m. and way past bedtime, and I'd pulled an all-nighter the previous night as well. While finally clearing the table I was playing video games on, I decided to put all the water bottles away that had been out for days and days. I tossed the empty ones, but my cat was being rambunctious and trying to open the trash can, so I picked her up. I was holding my cat and putting some unfinished water bottles back in the fridge. She struggled free and hopped onto the counter, but I was too tired to scold her, so I continued grabbing huge amounts of half-full water bottles from the counter, we're talking 6 or 7 at a time in both hands, and chucking them in the fridge. I pick them up, put them in the fridge, pick them up, put them in the fridge. I pick her up, I put her in the fridge, and I close the fridge. I took 2 minutes to finish up the dishes. I turned off the kitchen light. I heard faint mewing. I woke up, opened the fridge, and she's so cold, but she's okay. Now every time I open the frickin' fridge, she climbs in. Sometimes I don't notice her and she's trapped for a moment until I hear mewing, and I know it's all my fault. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was playing guitar and reached over to grab a cracker, and then I ate my pick. I sat there at an intersection in suburban Palo Alto at 11 p.m., patiently waiting for the stop sign to change. I was making ramen noodles and a pitcher of Crystal Light at the same time, so berry-flavored ramen is not good. I woke up from a deep sleep having the feeling that there was an earthquake going on, so naturally I called to my wife, who realized I was in the living room reading, and I asked her if everything was okay, and she asked why. I said, "There was an earthquake, is everything okay?" And she said, "No, you just tooted in your sleep and you woke yourself up." I went back to bed. During a period when I was unemployed for a few months, I got into the habit of undoing my trousers before arriving at the bathroom. This led to a very embarrassing situation I found myself in when I became employed again and just undid my belt and trousers in the hallway while heading to the toilet. Thankfully, I realized what I was doing before I exposed myself to my new co-workers. One time, my family traveled to Iowa and we stopped at a McDonald's. They were going through the drive-thru, but I needed to pee, so I went inside. I went out to the other exit when I was done, and there was a red minivan just like ours, so I went to my side and opened the door and wasn't paying attention. I sat down, buckled my seatbelt and realized it was a bit different, but I still did it. I looked around and the van was full of old people just staring at me, and they all looked scared. My family was in the van behind laughing their butts off. I took the metro home and then realized I drove to work. So that was a long night. That sounds like a problem for morning you. When my son went off to college, I was stuck in the same routine that I'd performed day in and day out for close to 18 years. For some reason, this truly threw off my entire thought process for weeks. One morning, I got up and turned on the coffee pot like I normally do and walked to his room to wake him up. However, instead of flipping the light on and telling him it's time to get up, I crawled into his bed and went to sleep. I woke up 6 hours later with both my daughters in the bed with me and the smell of burnt coffee permeating from the kitchen. I honestly didn't think his growing up and moving out would have hit me like that. I eventually stopped making extra breakfasts and trying to wake up someone who wasn't there. It did make me think of my own mother, though, and how she felt after we grew up and left the house. Let's just say that now, whenever I'm looking for my phone, the first thing I check is to see if it's currently in my hands. When I was in high school, I worked at a McDonald's. Most of the time, I was on drive-thru taking orders. You get the script down and go into autopilot every day you get to work. One day I'm taking an order and tell the man his total like always and tell him to pull forward to the next window. It takes me about 5 seconds of staring at this man to realize that I'm talking directly to him instead of over the headset. It takes about another 5 seconds for my brain to realize that I'm working the front counter and there's no window for him to pull ahead to. I found myself taking a bath with all of my clothes on. I never told anyone, I just went back to sleep. I drove my car to the student union to pick up a package, and I parked with my hazards on. After I got the package, I got food and proceeded to walk back to my room and play GTA for 2 hours before getting a call from the university police saying to move my car. Yeah, honestly, if I'd had a car during my bachelor's degree, I think the odds of me doing this were greater than not. I swear I was in a semi-vegetative state for most of my first year of uni. I turned up at work with the landline phone and my toddler's lunch. I jumped out of bed frantically, put my clothes on, brushed all the crap on my floor under my bed, and paused. Realized it was 3 a.m. in the morning and I didn't have school. I'm 23. After an 8-hour day of cashiering at Target, which has so many robotic small-talk conversations, I stopped at the dollar store. The conversation went something like the cashier asking, "Hi, how are you?" Me answering, "Good, how are you?" "I'm good, thanks." "That's good. Did you find everything okay today?" That conversation was had to the effect of everyone in line and the cashier looking at me like I was a psychopath. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's done awkward stuff on cashier autopilot, but it still sucked. I picked up my toothbrush to brush my teeth, but I also had the urge to go pee, so obviously I tossed my toothbrush into the toilet. After getting my toothbrush, I'll occasionally grab the deodorant instead of the toothpaste and stare at it for a minute while my brain tries to figure out how one's supposed to go on the other. I tried to mail my buddy a check, and it had been a while since I'd mailed anything. Long enough to forget how mail works, apparently. What I did was write my name and address in the center and his name in the upper left-hand corner. The letter then got returned to me. But still, my first thought wasn't, whoops, I failed at mailing this check. Instead it was, well, I guess this stamp is old, and the price of stamps went up. So I put another stamp on it and sent it again to myself, again. My mailman must think I'm an absolute idiot. Cup of coffee in my left hand, phone in the right. Go to my room, take a sip of my phone, and throw coffee on the bed. Well, I just threw a knife in the garbage and washed some breadcrumbs. There was a 6.0 earthquake at about 3 a.m., so I was asleep. The quake lasted 20 seconds, and I woke up about 16 seconds in, standing in the hallway hugging a vase. What the F? I took the wrong part of my package out at the urinal, and I peed my pants. The night before last, I went to the backyard to bring the dog into the house. Autopilot moved my feet 10 or so steps out the door, telling the dog to come in. My brain then caught up to the autopilot and remembered the dog was in fact in bed, and I was indeed approaching a black bear that was eating watermelon rinds from the trash can. I walked into the bathroom to pee, and instead of unzipping my fly, I unbuttoned my dress shirt, took it off, then took off my white undershirt as well. Then I realized I was standing shirtless at a urinal, and what the fricked? George Costanza? Step 1. Unwrap candy. Step 2. Throw candy in the trash. Step 3. Stare at the wrapper. I tapped a picture in the newspaper, hoping to see the full article. It took me a good 5 seconds to realize where I messed up. My sister had a brain fart and left the water running in the kitchen. I went to turn it off and flipped the kitchen light switch, repeatedly, then started cussing when the switch wouldn't cut the water off. Then I got my toolbox and started taking the faceplate off the light switch so that I could see why it wasn't cutting the water off. At that point, my other sister, who witnessed all of this, kindly pointed out that I'd lost my ever-loving mind and cut the water off herself. Sometimes I'll see something in my peripheral vision, and apparently your brain kind of does this autofill and tells you what you're seeing without actually seeing it. So I'll be walking my dog and see a bush or something and think to myself for a split second, oh, there's an ostrich across the street. Then I'm like, what the frick is an ostrich doing there? And realize it's just a bush. Got a bag of microwave popcorn and made it halfway up the stairs before I realized I didn't pop it. Put cat food in the coffee maker. 10 out of 10 would not recommend. I'm currently at university and I live on the 5th floor of a dormitory. All the floors are identical other than the colors of the paint on the wall. One day I was taking the elevator up to the 5th floor and I was sending a text to my mother. When I arrived at my floor, a person I'd never seen before got on the elevator. I consciously noted that it was weird because I knew everyone on my floor, but I walked to my room and walked in. My living room seemed slightly off, and then a girl walked into the living room and casually goes, "What are you doing in my room?" That's when I realized I'd gotten off on an earlier floor and just absent-mindedly walked into someone else's room. Needless to say, I got out of that room really fast after realizing what I'd done. I put coffee in my dog's water bowl the other day. It was very early in my defense. There are a lot of people who just apparently should have their pets and own breakfasts in separate rooms, because this is far from the first time feeding an animal while doing other kitchen tasks has resulted in disaster in this video. I'm not sure this necessarily counts, but I'm a sleep eater. In the past 4 months, I've woken up trying to open a can of green beans with my bare hands and drinking from a gallon jug of soy sauce. I was trimming a raw chicken breast and saw a spider in my kitchen. I screamed and immediately threw the chicken breast at the spider and embedded it in the meat. Whoops! To those asking if I ate the chicken breast afterwards, I forgot to mention that the spider was on the floor. Leaving work, I had my hat in one hand and cell phone in the other. Something misfired and I put the cell phone on my head and hat in my pocket. There was a flashing realization that something wasn't right while standing there holding a phone to my bald spot and sporting a look of bewilderment. I wish someone else had seen it. I usually would stop at a gas station in the morning to get coffee. On more than one occasion, I'd open the little flavor cups and pour them in the trash instead of into my coffee cup. Sometimes I'd do this for 3 or 4 of the little cups before realizing what I was doing. I was working at my computer and I had a cookie next to me. I finished the cookie and immediately took a bite out of the mouse. Realized it was hard, sucked on it for a few seconds and then put it down. Only realized what I'd done a few minutes later. What surprised you the most about moving from the third world to the first world? The toothpaste aisle. There is an aisle for toothpaste. It's been almost 25 years and that still boggles my mind. How well lit everything was. It was like looking at Christmas lights and the first time I smelled Burger King and saw a yellow Mustang. When I first came to Canada, it terrified me that people were so nice, especially when it came to traffic. The first few times it happened, I didn't know what the F was going on. I'd be standing in the little gap between the traffic signal and pavement looking at this car that starts slowing down 20 meters in advance. While I watch it, expecting it to go past so I can cross the road, it just stops. And then the driver makes a little hand motion thingy and I'm standing there thinking, do you want me to go? Do you want me to go first? What is this? Is this protocol? Is this what's done here? You wait for me? I, as a pedestrian, have rights and not just a bullseye on my face? So I spent the first year or so just freezing like a deer in headlights every time I had to cross a road. Because a lifetime of playing traffic frogger in Karachi did not leave me with the impression that drivers knew what the brake was for. And Canadians. You're nice. It's damned terrifying. Honduran here who moved to Germany. Being able to walk in the streets with your phone in your hand was a bizarre feeling. Also how everyone was on time. The passengers on trains have little to no instructions and mayhem somehow doesn't break loose. Being able to find a ride online from a stranger and not be murdered along the way. How everyone respected convention. Once I saw a hat on the floor for about as long as I sat there and nobody picked it up. In Honduras, it had been gone in less than a heartbeat. How they allowed and protected the Third Reich to hold a demonstration. In Honduras, if it wasn't the party in power, they would have been repressed in no time. How I didn't really need a car. I was able to take public transportation with my expensive headphones, book and smartphone in full view. Oh Deutschland, ich vermisse dich so sehr. What surprised my grandmother when she saw Finland was how conservative people were with land usage here. In Nigeria, during imperialism, a lot of land was wasted in grand architecture. I remember going to a university there. From entering the front gate, we had to drive what was at least a half-mile before reaching the first building. Otherwise, it was just all grass. Haha, yes, the Nordic countries are quite sparse and compact compared to a lot of places, even other first-world countries. But I'd argue there's a lot of beautiful stuff there anyway in the right seasons. You can't beat Helsinki in summer. Air conditioning everywhere. I was amazed at how you can go to libraries and borrow books for free without paying anything. I felt like there had to be some catch, but after asking numerous questions, I complied and got me a library card for borrowing a gazillion books. I was walking around Hong Kong and was astonished to see that someone, presumably on the orders of some local government entity, had put up Christmas lights above the railing on the subway. If they tried that in Manila, it would be gone and sold within hours. I grew up in Kenya as a child, and when I finally returned to the first world, I was surprised how relaxed everyone was about not being mugged. I worked at a hospital in Kenya earlier this year, and the interns there wouldn't let my brother or I go home walking after 7 p.m. because they said it was just too dangerous. We were staying at a church 500 meters down the road that wouldn't take more than 3 minutes to get to. Constantly, people would tell us to watch our valuables, and it became so pessimistic that when we left, we were in that mindset for about a month afterwards. The size of everything. I was picked up from the airport in a Ford Expedition, which was about the size of my house back in Cuba, and then I was taken to a 6-bedroom house. I remember I used to feel uncomfortable in the big rooms, so I would hang out in closets and whatnot at first. On a side note, right before I left, my older brother told me that in the US you could tell the toilets to wipe you, and a hand would come out the back to gently wipe your bum. He went on to specify that I must ask in English, because if I asked in Spanish, the hand would put a finger in my butt. I didn't go number 2 for a week. So I guess another surprise was normal toilets. My mum had to wait in line for bread for 2 hours. 2 hours for frickin' bread. When it was her time to turn in her food stamps, sometimes it'd run out. She comes here and there are aisles of bread, rows and rows. White, whole wheat, multigrain, 12-grain, 18-grain. Flax, ancient grain, hot dog buns, hamburger buns, artisanal breads, sun-dried tomato, garlic bread, cheese buns. Cheese bread? It blew her frickin' mind. My father grew up in Sri Lanka, and if you've been to any South Asian country, you'll know that the roads are deadly and nobody stops for anyone. He said the thing that surprised him the most was when he went to England to study and people stopped at the crossing waiting for the man to turn green. When the man turned green, he said it was like magic that all the cars stopped to let people cross the road. Wait, what? Water is free? And free refills? Huh. When I first moved here from the Philippines, I was surprised just how frickin' clean it was. Holy crap, I felt like I could just eat off every gosh darn surface of the airport, whereas the airport in the Philippines would probably give you herpes if you sat down anywhere. Everything wasn't jam-packed to the frickin' gills and nobody was peeing in the street. My uncle joined the Peace Corps and lived in Tonga, a tiny island in the Pacific, for 2 years. One of his friends from his time there went on a road trip to the US and my uncle met her in LA. Anyhow, they got into a cab at the airport and my uncle said that his friend had this terrible look of anxiety on her face and just kept looking around. Her head was just darting around every which way. He asked if everything was alright and she said she was waiting for the high-speed chases, gunfire and explosions. My uncle had to explain that those sorts of things typically only happen in movies. For her, the only window into the world outside of Tonga was movies she'd seen. It's interesting how media or the lack thereof can shape someone's perceived reality of the world. In the States, when people say, "How are you?" they're really not asking the question. I cringe whenever I think about all the times I stopped for 5 minutes and talked to the people who asked me that question during my freshman year. how much food gets served and or thrown away. Also, how much fresh produce costs compared to fast food. I used to work in a bakery. Each night we'd throw out at least 6 to 8 bags of fresh bread and cakes. It's devastating to think about all those people who are in hunger, and there I was throwing out perfectly fine food because of some stupid chain store policy. I think what struck me was how sheltered I was in my third world. I pretty much lived in a first world bubble in the third world. Oh, there are a few things. The roads aren't smooth and clean like glasses and mirrors, the girls are not as promiscuous as portrayed in the MTV videos and movies, and there are beggars, we just call them homeless people. Peaches. Delicious, delicious peaches. The majority of you probably think that I'm joking, and I get that because peaches are taken for granted, but when I wasn't living there, I didn't know peaches even existed. Once I came here though and had some, it was frickin' fantastic. Sometimes it's just the little stupid things that are great. Roads are smoother, there are traffic laws and most people abide by them, there's no concept of a line in third world countries, sadly even in China and the Middle East as well, people bargain more in the third worlds, refrigeration isn't standard in third world, things in fridges and coolers at the market are just lit and blowing lukewarm air. Ice is uncommon, if it is around it came from a block of ice. Customer service exists in the first world. Third world, you eat what's being made even if it's bad or made incorrectly. You don't like it? Too bad. Fruits are better in the third world. First world fruits, most of the time, are picked before being ripe and shipped. Diet soda options are everywhere. Both Pepsi and Coke options are everywhere too. Water in most first world countries is drinkable by tap. Third world, not so much. Depending on where you are, showers and toilets are combined. No flushing toilet paper down the toilet in third world countries. Most streets are clean in the first world, trash, litter and garbage is everywhere in the third world. People honk in the third world to tell you they're there. In the first world, honks are used mainly for road raging. That final one is interesting because while it's very distressing for people who aren't used to it, it is technically the correct use of the horn, to announce your presence on the road. We have long since lost that purpose in the first world and it's used as an intervehicular FU. Well, mine's more about a relative, not me. I lived in Australia and I have Vietnamese relatives. Once, a cousin who had lived his life in Vietnam came here to visit. When he arrived, he was so confused. "Dean, what's all this grass in front of your house?" "It's our lawn," I replied. "What's that? Were there animals that graze on it?" "We don't have any animals, no." At this point, he was beyond confused. So what do you do with it?" "Well, we just let it grow and then when it gets too long, we cut it down and throw it away." I can honestly say with no hyperbole that I've never seen someone so confused. Let me tell you a story. For the first few years of my life, I lived in a rainforest in a little leaf hut with my grandmother. No electricity, no running water, no cars. It was literally a rainforest and I had no idea what the outside world was like. My father, who lived in Australia, was deported from my country because my family didn't like him. Then decided that at age 7 I would have to come to Australia for my education. The whole experience was surreal to me. I remember flying on the plane and being confused at how such a heavy thing could fly. Even the lights were amazing to me. Turning them on and off was like magic to my mind. When I landed in Australia, my father asked me if I wanted a drink of water and my reply was, "Well, it doesn't seem to be a river anywhere nearby, so how are we going to get it?" My dad then showed me a tap and my mind was blown. Where was the river where this water was coming from? The refrigerator also blew my mind. In the village, if we had meat, we'd eat it immediately otherwise, and here was this magic machine that preserved it. He later asked if I wanted to go to the grocery store to get food for dinner. I replied with, "You don't have to grow your own food?" My dad chuckled and we went to the grocery store. I was amazed. Most of these foods I'd never seen in my life, and there was so much of it. Also, I could eat any meat I wanted. I could keep on going with things that amazed me, but really there were so many. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. People pick up poop after their dog craps on the street. In Russia, there's an expression, "Spring will come and crap will float." That's because during the winter, every time a dog takes a dump on the street, it freezes and gets covered by snow. Now imagine the reverse process as it gets warmer. Now, I was young when I came to the US, but I seriously expected flying cars. I was very disappointed. How confident people are and the way they approach and talk with sweetness, especially women, it blew my mind. Everything just works. Banks have no armed guards, and while you're banking, you have no fear that someone in the bank is spotting to see if you take money out to rob you a block away. You stop at a traffic light at 3 a.m. and you actually wait for it to turn green again. You don't just do a rolling stop and run the light for fear of someone hiding in the bushes nearby jumping at you to take your car. A package is delivered to your front door while you're away. You can be 99% sure it will still be there by the time you make it home. Nobody's going to steal it. You have a problem with a company or a product, you can be reasonably certain that companies will try to make it right and not just laugh when you call to complain. If you call the police, they'll actually come to your house. Same for ambulances and firefighters. You pay taxes, but you have good roads, hospitals, police, infrastructure, like phones, streetlights, and water. The politicians caught stealing are out of public life with no hope of being elected again. In some of them anyway. Streets are generally clean and free of graffiti. If you need the justice system, it works reasonably well. Nobody's going to get away with murder because they have connections to a judge. All of these things are non-existent in the third world. Well, Portugal is a fully developed country, and we've recently elected mayors who served time in prison for having stolen from the same cities that were electing them again. Yep, I think this can also happen easily in Spain, Italy, or Greece. I think a lot of Southern Europe countries still have the mentality of, he robbed us, but he also did good things that we see in developing countries. From what my friends have told me, supermarkets. They're amazed by its size and vast food selection. The taste of fruit and vegetables and the sense of community. Maybe this was just because fundamentally my family is quite antisocial, but when we lived in Zimbabwe and Uganda, my brother and I were constantly visiting friends and the friends of our parents. But since I've moved to Canada, I only occasionally see my friends outside of school. Not sure if Vietnam counts as third world, but definitely developing. This was 10 to 12 years ago. I was about 11 or 12 at the time. Holy frick, the highway. We landed in LA, and seeing 12-lane both-direction highway in person was mind-blowing. Cars everywhere. Also, the moving sidewalks at the airports. We had escalators, but moving sidewalks were a first. Glorious AC everywhere. Toilet paper. Yep, I was amazed by the amounts of toilet paper available. There were also channels that aired cartoons 24/7, buffets and Salisbury steaks, and Toys R Us. Oh, I was in heaven. I was a teacher in South Korea and had a friend who was a North Korean escapee. Very nice guy and very bright, but the little things were funny. I remember him just being enamored with the little handheld firecrackers we'd shoot off at the beach. Then there was the time he was beside himself with excitement at a movie he'd just seen. He asked if we'd ever heard of it. The movie was E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Growing up in a Muslim country, I was simply amazed at how easy it was to buy beer and adult magazines in the US. As a 9-year-old coming to Chicago from the Philippines, a lot of things definitely caught me by surprise. Before arriving in America, I thought that everything was supposed to look like The Sims. Boxy houses in the suburbs with clean-cut grass and the most regal people imaginable. Instead, I saw many similarities with the Philippines, especially in the urban areas. The poverty, the beggars, and the hardship that many people faced really caught me off guard. I used to think that the United States was the closest thing to heaven, and while I soon learned that America is certainly better overall, I was nevertheless surprised that many people did struggle in the mighty United States. Yeah, it's important to state that a lot of places in first world countries have vast economic disparity depending on where you live. Depending on where you move, it might not be a utopia land that solves all your problems and hands you a job. Plus, there are often rampant biases about migrants in most places, even my beloved country. Mostly, it comes down to expecting lower standards, then being surprised when standards are higher, and then realizing that your third world view is affecting how you live in the first world. Having lived in a first world country for 10 years now, the difference from when I came here to now is huge. Gone are the old attitudes towards courting, race, and money. You question how you ever thought life in a developing country was normal. You question things openly, not in fear of reprisal. There's an open discourse on political issues. There aren't checkpoints at every intersection. People have an opportunity to be whatever they want. You notice things like trades jobs pay more relative to trades in a developing country. You get to see an economy in motion. You're served by and large by a capable police force in the first world. Bribery is not rampant. Education is more freely accessible. Electricity, running water, more than one national newspaper, a more open internet, access to information, great infrastructure for economic development, a chance to see public transport run efficiently, a ridiculous mixture of races and beliefs, a chance to know more than your limited worldview. And if you can't appreciate moving to a civilized part of the world, then maybe it should just chew you up and spit you out. I am who I am today because I was given a chance to see things from a civilized point of view. I lived in Indonesia for 7 years of my childhood, ages 3 through 10, on the island of Sumatra. From a child's perspective, the biggest change was how rarely kids go outside in first world countries. When kids in Indonesia get bored, they go outside by default. I learned to play soccer with a ball that was pretty much rags, in flip-flops or bare feet, on concrete. It was all we did, play outside. When I got home from school, the first thing I'd do was step outside, and there was always some neighbor friend who was already out there having fun. Then we moved back to the US and suddenly nobody was outside. The street at my first house in the US had just as many kids as my street in Indonesia did, more even. But if I went outside or rode a bike or kicked a ball around, I could be out there for hours without ever seeing another kid. Because in first world countries, we have so many passive, indoor activities that we can enjoy by ourselves or with only people we invite over, and there's no longer a need to go outside for entertainment. That took a lot of getting used to. Also, pants. Indonesia's on the equator, so I literally never wore pants, just shorts. I even called pants long shorts for a long time. And vacuum cleaners terrified me, because all the floor there is tile to fight the heat, plus it's cheap. Both of those things were just a culture shock, though. They don't have a lot to do with third and first world transitions. Gosh, I could spend days talking about this. Honestly, I think the world would be a much better place if every kid spent a year or two of their formative years in another country, or at least a different region of their country. It's such a big part of who I am in so many ways. How easy it was to gain weight. Huh, same. I knew Americans were fat, but damn. There's no community in the first world. I live in Southern California, so I do hear it's different than other places in America. Growing up, I knew all of my neighbors. People would just walk into my house, show up for a quick bite to eat or coffee just because they were nearby. I currently live in a series of townhouses with most of my neighbors my age, and I know one of their names only because my roommate was hitting on her and freaked her out. Wait, so you're telling me you have so much clean water that you go number 2 in it? Huh. How much you all take everything you have for granted. Like it's just normal for survival to be so easy for you guys. As somebody from the third world, I was really surprised at how cold the nights get in first world Mercury. You never expect that from a planet so close to the sun. I grew up in East Africa. I live in the United States. Everyone is loud, from the little kid to the tall shy nerd, loud and eloquent. It blows my mind every time. Also, 9 out of 10 white people try too hard to avoid awkwardness, such that it comes out counterproductive, and almost everyone is just super awkward. I work in retail, by the way. Can confirm, I'm American and I've been told by people from other countries that I'm astoundingly loud and awkward. But some parts of the first world are still third world. My mum teaches high school in rural Georgia. The county she teaches in has a 46% literacy rate. Let that sink in. Less than half the people in that county can read. That's not supposed to happen in a first world country. Where I came from, small things made us happy, like playing around on dusty ground with a football made out of plastic bags strewn together into a ball with string, using small rocks as goalposts, or we'd just walk around and talk. No matter how hungry or poor people were, they found joy in something. When I moved to a wealthier country, fellow peers were so moody and full of angst. Hanging out meant sitting together in a room playing Game Boys, this was the 90s, or watching movies, with nary any actual personal interaction. Pizza that you made yourself at home, which was cheaper, is apparently a no-no. If you bring food over, it has to be Domino's or something. Oh, and God forbid you wear the same clothes to school. Ironically, in some schools, this actually makes you more elite. I left the USA at 6 and moved back in at 18. Life was very different living in a small village in the Philippines. We collected rainwater off of our roof into barrels, iodined it, filtered it, and then boiled it so that we could have clean drinking water. We had a solar panel on the roof that charged a truck battery during the day. It gave us enough electricity to run a fluorescent bulb at night. And the biggest surprise? All the bottled water. We have a miracle flowing out of our tap every time we turn the faucet. A freaking miracle, and yet everyone complains and moans about the taste, so they pay to have someone else's tap water in bottles. I don't get it. Water is precious and nobody seems to care. What do people do to make themselves look cool that actually makes them look like a D-bag? Those people who are weirdly proud of not reading a book since high school. Constantly telling people about the women they've done the deed with or were otherwise involved with. I knew a guy like this in college. He was one of the most obnoxious guys I've ever known. This dude in high school tried to convince me that he had lain with my 21-year-old Christian married sister. I had to sit next to him in math class and all he talked about was how many girls he had been with. Ugh. Pretending to know or to be something when you actually have no idea. When I was younger, the only thing that anyone ever noticed me for was my knowledge, So naturally, I assumed that more knowledge equaled better person. Of course, I wanted to be a good person, so when I didn't have any more knowledge left, I started making up stuff to keep my non-existent reputation. And damn, did I make up lots of BS. I'm trying not to do that anymore, though. Bragging about how many people you've slept with. Bonus for referring to them as a body count. I have a coworker who has the, quote, gift of gab and is very proud of his ability to give people false assurances while being extremely vague, essentially just bombarding them with words until they're satisfied. It's a useful trick, I suppose, but when you hear him do it in real time, you realize he's just a very good liar. Being a butthole to other people to boost your own ego. Creepy flirting at the gym. Picking on someone in a group and trying to get everyone else to laugh at them. Not in a, hey, everyone's joking around kind of way, in a, being a nasty piece of work and embarrassing the person kind of way. People like that suck. I had this happen to one of my friends once. He's disabled, so D-bags always tried to pick on him in middle school. He was actually in a group of popular people in class, and one of the other popular guys said, "Hey, by a show of hands, who's the guy you hate most in the group?" Hoping that everyone would vote against my friend. Then they all proceeded to vote against the same guy who called the vote. It was the funniest thing. Well, he effed around and found out, didn't he? I think if your group of friends are mostly good people, they're most likely to automatically point to the one member trying to create dissent and poor feeling, aren't they? Hope you learn from the experience, jerky dude. I've been on dates with people who were dismissive or rude to the servers, and it was a huge turnoff. A friend of mine once brought another friend that I'd never before met to our weekly trivia night. This girl was the biggest witch to the server that we see almost every single week, to the point that she wrote her a snotty note on the receipt when she paid. There wasn't anything particularly wrong with the service, she was just being rude as a standard action. That was an instant, well, you're never invited back here moment. People who pick fights. The ones who don't know how to get attention, so they start gossiping about everyone. I'm like, I know your life isn't interesting, but please have some respect for others and for yourself. Endlessly talking and bragging about their private lives. For an example, I had a real prick of a boss who once said, "Man, it wasn't yesterday I got with that woman," after a customer left, which made me and my colleagues somewhat uncomfortable. He also talked about how his wife better show those TTs for everything he does. I'm not interested, and I think it's super trashy to talk like that. People who vandalize the rocks, trees, and stuff in parks and nature reserves. It takes you out of the experience when you're scanning a gorgeous landscape and your eyes land on a love heart containing the words "Butthead plus Ding Dong Forever," or whatever their names are, in bright colors. Okay, this one's very specific, but I once knew a bloke who thought he was really cool for not liking Game of Thrones, which is fine, but he'd then post spoilers of it on social media along the lines of, "I don't watch or care about Game of Thrones, but X character died in the most recent episode. Unlucky if you saw this post." I fell victim of it once, and I literally thought my blood was boiling. I was so angry. The lesson here is probably to stay off social media before you've seen the most recent episode of a show that you love, but still, screw that guy. Being mean to your serving staff. It doesn't make you look assertive, it makes you look like an ass hat. Picking on the weird kids. I feel really guilty about this one. I was bullied and picked on from an early age. I felt completely disconnected from my peers around me, but when the new kid came around and they gave me an opportunity to feel accepted, I took it. That kid was a complete jerk himself, which was why I excused picking on him at the time, but looking back, it was just really cruel, and the reason why he was a jerk was probably a defense mechanism. Sharing their trashy taste in music out loud on public transportation. Even if it's good music, everyone in the bus is getting out of work or school, they're tired, and they don't want to listen to your music plus the sound of people speaking plus the sound of the road, etc. It's just too much when you're tired. You know what annoys me worse than anyone being actively mean? People trying to do something nice for someone and videotaping it for clout on social media. Whenever someone gatekeeps a music artist like they discovered them and they're the whole reason for that band's success. Don't get me wrong, you should support the artist, but don't be that butthole that determines who is worthy of a common trend. The Strokes were getting it about a month or two back. One of the songs from the album they released last year blew up on TikTok, and people were attempting to gatekeep the band as if they hadn't been together for 23 years, won 4 Brits and 1 Grammy, before that song got big on TikTok. Look, failing school doesn't inherently make you a D-bag, but bragging about it as if it's something that's cool isn't the best presentation of character either. Teachers who are proud of many of their students not passing. If I ever get a teacher like that, maybe I should ask why they're proud for being a bad teacher. I had a professor like what you described, and I switched majors because she taught quite a few classes in my major. First day of class, she told everyone that you'll be lucky to get a C on your own. First couple of tests, I studied my butt off and I got like a 12% grade after the first month. I looked at the classes I had to take and she taught 3 or 4 more of them, so I changed my major because I knew I wouldn't be able to get past her. It's horrible that a major crossroads in your life was determined by a crap teacher. Handing a homeless guy a $10 bill and posting it on YouTube. The line between joking and bullying can be a thin one, and a lot of D-bags either don't see it or they just don't care. Also important to note that the line moves depending on who you're with and your relationship with them. It can be tough to walk the line, but my general rule is if everyone isn't laughing, including the person the joke is aimed at, you might need to pull back a bit. People who tease guys for drinking girly drinks. If a guy wants to drink a strawberry daiquiri, let him drink it in peace. You know what's manly? Drinking whatever the frick you want without giving a crap what people think. Blasting music in public transportation without headphones. God, I want to scream at everyone who does this on New York City subways, but they're 100% looking for someone to start some crap with them. Yeah, that's the thing. Sure, maybe some of them are just obnoxious, but on the off chance that it is someone who's mentally prepped for a fight and is going to follow you down the train heckling you if you back off, it's not worth it unless you're also dying for a scrap. Gatekeeping a fandom or hobby. You aren't a real fan of XYZ band if you started listening to them after this album, or you're not a real beer drinker if you don't like IPAs. Excuse me, are you gatekeeping? How dare you? Hey, gatekeeping is my gatekeep. Supporting a celebrity who doesn't give a crap about your existence online to the extent of bullying and name-calling people who don't worship that celebrity. Using a cell phone in public on speaker. Get a headset. Personally, I find this practice about as acceptable as tooting in a crowded elevator. Even worse is playing music from your phone in public. I always thought that these people being insane or having such little amounts of personality that they think the musical performance will make up for it. Judging another person for their interests, even if the other person's interests don't affect or hurt anyone else. The other day I had an acquaintance tell me how a friend of mine who likes to collect Funko Pops must be such a virgin, even though the guy is literally married with a kid on the way. I mean, Brandon Moreno, the new UFC flyweight champion, is one of the biggest badasses in the sport and collects Funko Pops extensively. Driving around residential areas too fast in cars with really loud engines and those exhausts that go bang, bang, bang all the time. They look like nothing other than inconsiderate buttholes. Don't forget the subwoofer system that rattles every window in the house from blocks away. It amazes me that they can even see where they're going with all that vibration. I've said it before, I was a butthole teenager. I did a lot of stupid stuff in my time, however, I always turned down my loud stereo system in residential areas and after a certain time at night. You can be a butthole, just don't be that butthole. That whole I don't give an F attitude online where people just hate everyone and be super edgy. It doesn't make you look cool, it just makes you look like a tryhard. I think people look at not giving an F the wrong way. Personally, I really don't give an F what anyone else thinks of me, but I also try not to give people reasons to actively dislike or hate me, and if I happen to do or say something that hurts someone else unintentionally, I have the capacity to accept responsibility and apologize. It's possible to not give an F and also not be a butthead. It's really not that hard to do. So in many schools during COVID, we couldn't leave the classroom during the break, and my classmates fricking loved to make or watch TikToks on full fricking blast. They did it for the whole fricking year of 2020 and 2021. My coworker did that on break a lot. I swear to God, if I hear that fricking "Oh no" song one more fricking time. Ugh. Declaring themselves to be an alpha male or high-value woman or anything like that. It screams immaturity and a total lack of self-awareness. The LinkedIn alternative is declaring yourself as an entrepreneur or thought leader of nothing. Undermining a person every time they try to talk. My ex did this to me and the amount of confidence I lost was terrible. I'm still recovering after 3 years. Teasing someone when they gather guts to talk in a group and then laughing is useless. I can't explain how badly it hurts. Putting an insanely loud exhaust on a crap car and then accelerating to a rev max on a 200-meter stretch of road before having to brake because otherwise you crash into the car in front of you, while listening to some crap hardcore or hardstyle music at a volume otherwise only experienced at festivals. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Posing as being brutally honest, constantly invalidating others isn't cool and speaks of your inability to feel validated by anything other than people. People who say anything they want, insults, slurs, pure meanness, and then when they get called on it say, "It was a joke." I had someone tell me that they'd commit the unspeakable act against me, then try to play that off as a joke. Revving your engines and blasting your crappy music through a city neighborhood regardless of the time. I live in Jersey City and this happens quite often. You don't look cool. Judging people for their music choices, like when someone goes through your iPod or Spotify or whatever and is all, "Ew, you listen to them?" then proceeds to tell you about the super edgy music they listen to that nobody really knows about yet. Driving expensive cars and cutting people off. Your super loud pickup truck with no muffler. We get it, you vape. Wearing name-brand clothing just because it has the brand written all over it for everyone else to see. The other day I learned that there are rules to this kind of dressing. For example, Adidas can't be worn with Nike. Apparently hypebeasting is an art and a science. Calling yourselves Alpha or Type A. It's almost like it's a code for massive jerk. Also calling people who agree with them lions and the people who disagree ignorant sheep. I can't take anyone who unironically uses alpha seriously. It's one of those things that if you have to say you are, you probably aren't even close. Having a phone conversation on speakerphone with the volume turned all the way up. God, I hate those people. Being proud of their own ignorance. So to clarify, it's okay to be wrong as long as you're willing to admit it. It's okay to not be naturally intelligent, it's okay to not know everything. What's not okay is being willfully ignorant or stubbornly clinging to patently false information. Yep, the narrator just can't read comment sections anymore. I wonder if I'm just jaded now, but it feels like there's a lot more denial than actual debate happening in response to any given subject on Twitter or X or Threads now. People just hurl insults and leave. Acting like they don't care about anything. Like sure, it was cool in the early 2000s, but now when I see a guy acting like he's too cool to like movies or games or hanging out, it's just so cringy. Like bro, you're not special for saying you don't like anything. And I don't mean introverts like myself who genuinely don't want to do stuff sometimes, I mean the dude who will agree to hang out and then just the whole time is just complaining and saying, "This is so lame." I don't know how this became a thing, but I feel like the weird one when I have actual interests and I like learning about them. But oh no, Mr. Johnny Cool over here immediately acts like I'm the weirdest person ever for enjoying something and taking it seriously. Like what do you do in your free time? Just stare at a wall and try not to be too excited about anything? When people film themselves giving money or food to the homeless. Ultimate D-bag, or they just want to brag about it and don't care. People who flaunt or brag about their expensive car, especially the ones whose parents bought it for them. Taking their dogs into large crowds for no good reason, and even though nobody asks, they loudly proclaim that this is their service dog, the jittery, nervous chihuahua that you're holding tight to your chest because it's squirming to get free, the dog with no vest and obviously little to no training. A service dog, sure. Being TikTok famous and listening to music with the speaker on, especially on public transport. Snapback hats with a flat brim and the stupid gold sticker still attached. Blasting music with their windows down. My neighbors were, quote, working on their car, windows down, blasting music and revving the engine. What were they working on? Refilling the fricking wiper fluid reservoir. Smoking in no smoking zones. I saw a truck yesterday with a sticker that said, "My other ride is a redhead." So yeah, I think that person goes top of this list. Cars that make a lot of noise and just need a muffler. Any keyboard warrior who's actually a scaredy cat in real life. Judging people who dress differently to you. Spitting in public or indoors. This happens in my school and it is disgusting. Revving your engine for no reason. Popped up collars on polo shirts. That trend was in more than 20 years ago now, but some guys who peaked in that era just won't let it go. I saw a guy on Judge Judy wearing 2 polo shirts with both collars popped. He was being sued because he was being paid to do IT work for someone, changed the user's name to gay, and refused to change it back. He was definitely still living in the year 2000. People who think consuming certain media makes them a better person. For example, some people think as long as they listen to loud rap music in public, people will think they're cool. Dudes who catcall women or don't have enough class to realize that just because a woman's good-looking and by herself at the moment, that it's okay for them to approach her and start a conversation with comments about her looks. Pet names aren't a good look when you don't know someone either. As a guy, this crap annoys me to no end. You should quit being dogs. When the rims on their car are worth more than the car itself. Acting like virginity is a bad thing, or conversely, that having done the deed makes you a better person. Neither of those are true. Super loud motorcycles disrupting entire communities. Being condescending to waitstaff and other service people. Bragging about their bedroom or love lives. Bragging about their income or material possessions. Being an underachiever, somehow between all of those underdog movies and the trope of smart people being socially inept or wealthy people being morally bankrupt, the public consciousness has somehow shifted to the idea that being below average is something to brag about. I've met people who literally brag about not reading or working out, and that's honestly just sad. Driving around in a lifted truck and/or with political flags flying. I'll grant ya, lifted trucks by themselves aren't a D-bag thing, but every coal-rolling, MAGA flag-flying truck I've seen is lifted. Revving the engine really loud. This is probably the winner of the biggest recurring complaint we have on here, don't you think, folks? There you have it. If you rev, it seems like the vast majority of planet Earth hates you. But you're a D-bag, so no doubt you'll just enjoy the attention. Flicking a cigarette. You're literally littering and sending a small torch out into the world. I already find it a gross habit, but your body, your choice, whatever. I just hate the inherent littering associated with smoking and the nonchalance of the users doing it. Bragging about not having a TV. Great, you're so much more cultured than me. Being a jerk to teachers. I'm just going to go out on a limb here because I could be the only one who thinks this, but selling skinny teas or teddy bear vitamins on media. Okay, the huge metal man-berries that guys hang from the tow hitch on their pickup truck. D-bags. Riding a motorcycle without a helmet. I think you look like a frickin' idiot, and I'm worried about your brains being splattered on my windshield. Diesel trucks rolling coal, which is the practice of modifying your vehicle so it sprays black smoke everywhere. Racing or speeding loudly down a street. Whenever someone goes roaring by, everyone on the sidewalk collectively shakes their heads and says, "Well, that guy's got nothing going on downstairs, like clockwork." Being a former inmate. I've talked to too many people who thought that being arrested and put in prison made them look tough. No, it makes you look dumb. I had a new guy start at the job site, and the first chance we had to loiter and shoot the crap, this brat proudly let us know that he just got out of prison, like it would make him seem hard or exotic or something else. He drove drunk and killed one half of a newlywed couple, and still had no regret. He drinks behind his parole officer's back and drives despite losing his license. Always too fast and generally drunk. Everyone I know is just disgusted. Especially the guy who had been in a coma for a few weeks due to a drunk driver, and the guy who had a loved one killed by one. I suppose there could be reasons for going to prison that legitimately are badass, like maybe killing someone who attacked a kid or stealing to fund a life-saving medical treatment for a loved one, but most crimes are shameful. I suppose this kid listened to some sort of aggro music that makes it sound like doing time is impressive. I'm not sure what the deal was, as I tried very hard to avoid his company. Trying to act like a manly man. Everyone knows someone like this. Drinks crappy pea water beer because mixed drinks are apparently girly drinks, gets defensive if someone makes a joke towards them, melts down if it's a gay joke, ridicules people for eating rabbit food and insists on their meat and potatoes because they're a man. I could go on, but I think I've set the scene fine. Smoking a cigarette and then just throwing it on the ground when you're done. Littering. I'm not entirely sure the logic behind it, but that gets my vote. I'm assuming that those idiots who throw crap out of their cars or leave all their trash behind while camping or hiking must think they look pretty cool, because they don't care about nature. rolling coal, new jeans that are pre-ripped, man buns, and those giant watches. Squatted trucks and that stance stuff with tires contacting the pavement at a 45-degree angle. Both make vehicles very unsafe to drive. Disrupting the Zoom meeting so that everyone can feign interest in their cat or dog or whatever pet. Saggy pants. Being an anti-COVID vaxxer. These D-bags on Facebook who post daily about how they're a wolf among sheep. They think they're so much smarter than everyone else because they watched a video on YouTube. Ridiculous superiority complex. Riding my bumper on the highway. We get it, you're so cool that your life and the lives of everyone else on the road don't matter. God forbid you spend 3 more seconds driving slightly behind someone else. What is the weirdest thing that a medical patient flat out denied? I'm a nurse. We had a patient come into the operating room for brain surgery. Probably mid-50s guy with a nice head of light brown hair. Before the patient comes into the actual operating room, we ask them a series of questions, including whether they've had implants, jewelry, non-hospital clothes, stuff like that. The guy says no to all these questions. After the patient gets put to sleep, the surgeon grabbed his hair to start shaving it off because, brain surgery. All his hair peeled off because he was wearing a wig and didn't tell us. We almost shaved his hairpiece because he wouldn't admit to anyone that he wore it. Being permanent and also having never so much as touched a man. People actually believe women can get preggers in a public pool or so after their parents did the deed in the jacuzzi, and the girl uses the jacuzzi and conceives that way. Anything but admit that they did the deed with someone in front of their parents. I'm not a doctor, but a nurse. I had a patient come in with a toothpick in his member, refused to tell me how it got there, and insisted he was picking his teeth and it just fell in. I admitted a guy for chest pain. As part of the workup, I did a urine substance screen which came back positive for using white snow. After the rest of his cardiac workup was negative, I said to him, "Good news, you didn't have a heart attack. It's likely that your chest pain was caused by using that white snow." His answer was, I didn't use that. See, I was at a party and people had some lines of it out on the table. As I was walking by, an oscillating fan blew it into my face, which is why my pee came back like that. Yeah, got it. I'm a pediatric dentist and this one throws me for a loop every time, so I'll share it. When I sedate kids, they have to be NPO for 8 hours, so I always ask if they had anything to eat or drink in the morning. Parents never want to admit their kids ate or drank, even when I remind them it's very important, because if they chuck up and aspirate, they could die. Often they try to minimize it and say it was just a few bites, but one kid walked in eating a bag of Cheetos at reception and then the parent insisted to me that they hadn't eaten. Yeah, I'm 100% not sedating your child today. I used to work PR and marketing in an inner-city hospital. I was once hanging out with the ER folks when one of our regulars came in. He had some ongoing issues that often got him hurt. This would have been 2000 or 2001 or so, and I was young, so I'd never even heard of this. The guy had spent hours burying a Phillips head screwdriver in his abdomen, carefully working it around his major organs. He was a Vietnam medic and had some training, so he could feasibly do it. He straight up said, "What screwdriver? You guys are crazy." The attending was staring right at the x-ray and the handle of the screwdriver sticking out of his abdomen. That screwdriver must have been 4 inches long. I still shudder thinking about that. My God, that's scary and honestly really sad if problems of that sort were something of a regular thing with this guy. What do you even do about that? Are you allowed to call in or recommend any sort of intervention? Would that even work? I once had a patient come in with large calluses on the front of his ankles, which is a very unusual place to get calluses. I brought it up a few times because I thought maybe he was wearing his shoe wear improperly, but he kept waving off the question. Eventually, I got him to admit that the calluses were there because he'd recently started taking a prescription antidepressant medication, which made it very difficult for him to climax. He found out that if he lay on his living room carpet with his legs bent out beneath him in a W fashion and whacked the mule for several hours, he was finally able to achieve closure. So that's how he got those calluses. Nurse here. Had parents bring their 3-year-old son to the emergency department for 1 month of abdominal pain that just kept getting worse. I ask all the routine questions for this complaint. Lots of questions about his poop. Is it bloody, diarrhea, mucus? When was his last bowel movement? Any changes in the stool? And they deny any other concerning symptoms but abdominal pain. We do blood work, ultrasound, x-ray, everything comes back completely normal, but the kid is intermittently screaming in pain, curled in a ball. Over the next 5 hours, I continue to repeat the same questions. I asked repeatedly if there was anything going on that they could think of. Nope. The kid just doesn't seem well, but we have no reason to keep him. We decide to watch him a little longer and let him eat. The kid eats a bunch, a PB&J, apple juice, crackers, popsicle. No pain, so we decide to send them home. I bring in the discharge paperwork and I'm about to start going over instructions, and the dad goes, for the past 3 months he's had a lot of worms in his number 2. Worms. Fricking worms. You spent 6 hours denying worms. I literally just turned around and walked out of the room without saying a word. I was laughing almost to the point of tears. I couldn't wait to tell my resident. Deworming medications, a crap ton of wasted time, and they were on their way. I had a patient accuse me of crapping in her bed and threatening to sue me for malpractice. Keynote, she never got out of her bed. Had a patient in hospital, I forget what for. The point is that he disappeared for a few hours. When he came back, he was tachycardic to 160 beats per minute, massive pupils, and wouldn't sit still. We asked him what he'd taken while he was out. Nothing, he swears. He went to the pub and just drank lemonade. Okay, we say, we're going to take some blood and find out what you've taken. He then pipes up and says the friends he was with would probably think it was funny to spike his drink. What, we asked, did he think they might have spiked his drink with? Speed, he says. What do you know, blood confirmed that he had taken speed. But he insists he didn't take it, his drink was spiked. I'm a nurse. I had a kid once who I needed to get a urine sample from. He was 8. I gave him a cup and pointed him to the bathroom. I went to check on my other patients and came back. The kid was still in the bathroom. I go knock on the door. Hey buddy, you okay in there? I hear the sink going on full blast. Yep, everything's fine. I go back to his room a few minutes later and he hands me a bag full of water with a cup inside that also appears to be water. I pour the water out of the bag. Hey buddy, are you sure that this is pee in your cup? Yeah, my pee is always clear. The patient is wheeled off for the x-ray. I check the temperature of the so-called pee in the cup. It was, ironically, the same temperature as the water from the faucet. Come on, little homie, you gotta do better than that. Oh, this one is sad. It's from my old roommate. Girl had a very large lump on her chest that she didn't tell the doctors about. She actually went to the hospital for migraines, saying they were getting increasingly bad. When they found the lump, they asked why she didn't say she had that. She said she knew it was going to kill her eventually, but she just wanted to get rid of the migraines because they were giving her a lot of pain in her last months. I guess it's not super weird that this patient wouldn't admit this, but it's weird in the sense that it was super obvious what happened, so he might as well have. I used to do patient registration in the ER. 2 of us were wheeling around our computers and registering patients off of ambulances and getting patient information in rooms. A middle-aged guy comes in on an ambulance and my coworker takes it. So I'm finishing up some paperwork and I go to our front office and pull up the patient tracker board so I can see what still needs to be done, and a new patient pops up on the board. Chief complaint: eyeliner pens stuck in his ding-dong. My coworker walks into the office looking scarred. She explained the nurse asked him what happened and he said he slipped. She told him that doesn't seem likely, so he said he had an itch and thought it would help. We later found out from the nurse that he finally admitted that he saw it on TV and thought it would feel good. His 20-something-year-old daughter was with him, but she clearly had some form of developmental disability. It was an all-round sad situation, and I hope someone told him about sounding, and he did some research on safe practices for kinks and that sort of stuff. Apparently, they were both lodged in there pretty badly. People flat out deny when their last meal was. They think they can fool their PET scan, end up losing money, time, and over-irradiated. My God, I feel your frustration to my soul. Sir, have you eaten this morning? Nope, not since before midnight. Meanwhile, I'm looking at a sliver of contracted gallbladder. Are you sure? Because I'd hate for this test to come back incorrect and for you to end up meeting with a surgeon when you don't need to. Well, I might have had a couple of waffles and eggs. That they don't know how to read. I've been taught the trick of handing a paper upside down to them to see if they can read. It's good to know if they don't, so you can make extra sure they have a full understanding of their instructions instead of saying to read the details on the sheet. I can see why they'd not want to reveal that, and it's nice of you just to work out in advance if you have to give a super specific spiel about it, rather than shaming them for concealing this fact about themselves. I'd be a bit concerned about whether someone who can't read will be able to understand the medical terms you throw their way during the spiel, but then again, I guess you can really just break everything right down. Our patient lied about being able to see. We had this lady came into the ER at least once a month, usually for chest pain. She was in her 30s and morbidly obese. She had seen multiple specialists, had her heart, lungs, and GI system examined in almost every conceivable way. One night she comes in with sudden onset blindness. Not her first time with this complaint either. Last time she got a trip to the retina specialist. When I examined her, I walked around her bed and she tells her friend to get her feet off the chair so I could get by. She played it off super cool by adding, "If you have your feet up like you always do." Then came the neuro exam. I have her touch her nose, then touch my finger. Her idea of how a blind person would perform this exam was to touch her nose, then wobble her hand from side to side as she touched the end of my finger. Not to mention the near constant eye contact as we talked. I'd ask a question and start moving while she talked, and she would follow my eye perfectly. She was extremely relieved to find out she had conversion disorder and that her sight would be back soon. Maybe it was a factitious disorder. I tend to believe all her chest pains and crazy complaints were real feelings she was having due to a number of her social and psychological issues. In the ER at midnight, it was a lot easier to tell her it was a symptom of dealing with whatever social drama was happening with her life and that her eyes worked fine, instead of telling her she was lying to me for some gain. Either way, she was sick and needed reassurance. She was genuinely relieved, though. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This one happened just the other day. Had a patient come in looking pretty sick. Labs and vitals said the guy was in sepsis and most likely had a bad infection. The question was where? After some prodding and letting him know the seriousness of his situation, he finally admitted to the source of his infection. He didn't want to say it, so he just pointed between his legs. Looking underneath his underwear revealed a smelly, red, swollen, pus-straining bag. Some of it was even black and necrotic. Not a pleasant sight, and it looked horribly painful. He went on to explain that he had a painful lump on one of his jewels a few weeks back. He was told it was an infection and given antibiotics. The problem didn't go away, and by then he decided to take matters into his own hands. Literally. He had tied a string around one and proceeded to cut it out himself. Needless to say, it became horribly infected and was going to require surgical intervention. Luckily, I can tell you he ended up doing okay. Once had a woman come in for a, quote, possible yeast infection. On exam, she had a glass bottle stuck in her hoo-ha filled with urine. Totally wouldn't admit it was hers or explain how it got there even after we removed it. Just kept saying, "I think this is all a prank and you put it up there." Let's see. Other than all the random things that end up in rectums accidentally, this drunk electrician with the longest drill bit I've ever seen sticking through both legs and impaling his sack in between like a gross kebab. He was so drunk he thought he broke his hip. Denied owning any drill bits or for that matter having been drinking. Most common are the numerous substance or tox screens we do that come back positive for something, and everyone is shocked and borderline offended if it got into their system. You weren't breathing, we gave you Narcan, you started breathing again, woke up and then denied you used a narcotic. Yeah, alright. Had a patient refused to admit that he swallowed a pen, even though an X-ray showed the pen in his small bowel and we took the pen out during an emergency surgery. I'm a CT tech and I was to scan a woman's abdomen for belly pain. She and her girlfriend were there. I have to have a pregnancy test. I have to have one done. I can't radiate a fetus. I even ask nuns, so no exceptions. She denies up and down that she's pregnant, and then after the test I did, it said she was. She denied it and demanded a blood test, since she was a lesbian and never does the deed with men. Well, the blood test came back positive as well, surprise, and the argument that ensued was biblical. She was arguing with her girlfriend and the nurses and the doctor. I never ended up scanning her, and they chalked up her pain to being pregnant. The look on her girlfriend's face when I said it came back positive was one I'll never forget. So many of you are saying, you shouldn't have told her in front of her significant other, and you're partially right in a way, but the patient had given her that permission, and I didn't question it. Had she not, I would have probably asked her girlfriend to leave the room. You can give anyone you deem necessary access or no access to your medical information. It's not limited to spouses. I volunteer at an ER. Prisoner shoved a ballpoint deep up his ding-dong to get out of being shanked, if I recall correctly. He insisted he had no idea how that got there. We spent hours deliberating how to get it out, and he just reaches down, still in his handcuffs, and pulls it out himself. There was a woman sent in by her family doctor for peeing some blood. We put a camera into her bladder with her awake, looking to exclude a tumor. We found her bladder full of citrus seeds and pits, so many of them. When asked why she put them there, she said, "Well, I eat a lot of fruit," and wouldn't accept any other responsibility for them being there. The going theory was that she put in a straw and pushed them down that. We thought pushing them in one at a time would be a bit scratchy, but we don't know because she never admitted to doing it. Oh, well, thank you for making me read that, as ever. 10 out of 10 would not make my insides hurt just by reading this again. Had an elderly lady from a nursing home come in super altered. She'd wake up briefly to answer questions, but then would be out like a light seconds later. Usually in this case, we assume it's from an infection or stroke, but we still asked about both legal and illicit substance use, since it can cause this kind of thing. The lady claimed several times she had never taken anything other than prescribed meds. Finally, as we were about to intubate her, put her on a ventilator, since she was getting worse, we cut off her bra and out pops a little baggie with some white powder and a baby straw. We gave her some Narcan and she gasps herself awake. Even after that, it still took her a long time before she said, "Well, maybe I did take some from a friend." Since then, I've trusted nobody when it comes to denying substance use. I'm not saying I think everyone is a substance addict, I'm just saying if you come in acting super out of it, you're probably going to get Narcan just to cover all the bases. I'm an internal medicine resident. Had a patient with sepsis that was being seen by the urology department. When I first read his clinical history, it stated something along the lines of, "Infected wound in the member, patient claims he doesn't know how he got it." So I began my assessment and asked him about his wound. Indeed, he claimed he didn't know how it happened. I decided that the priority was to stabilize the patient and I made some adjustments to antibiotics and other meds. Well, the guy went downhill. The sepsis became severe even though he was on the strongest antibiotics we had and 2 different vasopressors. His blood pressure was through the floor and eventually he needed intubation and went to the ICU. He managed to survive after a complete penectomy, and about 2 weeks later, I saw him again. Turns out the guy was trying to get his dog to lick him down there, and he put some peanut butter on it. Naturally, the dog bit him. He didn't seek medical help for about 2 days before the pain and fever was too much. If we knew from the beginning that the wound was inflicted that way, the antibiotic would have been different and probably would have made a difference. I feel sorry for the guy, but with a wound like that, he's lucky to be alive. I'm a nurse, not a doctor, but it's amazing how many patients lie about how much they drink. Dude, we aren't judging you. We just want to know if we need to worry about you detoxing when you come out of an open heart surgery. A lot of the comments in here seem to be about your personal doctor visits. My comment was very specifically referring to major surgery. All I'm saying is this. If you're going to land in the hospital for a significant amount of time and you're an alcoholic, it's to your benefit and safety to be honest about that, because the odds that you'll be withdrawn in your time there is high. If providers know that, they can plan to manage that so you don't withdraw. Last, sounds like a lot of you have run into crappy, judgy people in healthcare. We aren't all like that, and even the judgy ones really don't want you to detox on their shift. I can literally smell the smoke on your clothes and breath, see the nicotine stains on your fingers, and you're trying to tell me you quit smoking 10 years ago? I had a patient on our service for a heart failure exacerbation. We weren't sure why she had one now if she'd been stable for a few years prior. She also had a documented past use of smack, so we checked a urine substance screen. The screen was positive, and the next day I rounded on her. She asked me why she had the exacerbation. I told her that it was likely due to her smack use. She was shocked that I would accuse her of using. I brought up her positive test, and she insisted it was a false positive and told me she must have picked up the false positive from a toilet seat. That's not how any of that works. Not a doctor, but my husband. He had a 17-year-old girl with abdominal pains come into the ER with her mum. Turns out she's in full-blown labor. She assures everyone that she can't be pregnant, she's a virgin. The baby is literally crowning right there in ER. No maternity ward was in their hospital and she was in advanced labor when she arrived. She still insisted she was a virgin. My mum is a nurse and told me about the time some lady came in for abdominal pains as well. Yep, she was pregnant and gave birth, and as soon as the baby was out, she screamed, "It's not mine!" Mom responded with, "Well, it didn't come out of me." My patient presented over several months with recurrent huge abscesses that we couldn't explain. She was in horrible pain, had to stop working. We tested for everything. Eventually, her husband called me to say that he found syringes in her medical cabinet. We think she was injecting herself with fecal matter. When the syringes were found, she stopped coming into her appointments. To those asking why, I think she has Munchausen syndrome. She wanted the attention from being sick. I started getting suspicious when she'd always get a new abscess before any court dates for her child protection services problems and needed a doctor's note to get out of the court date. She denies everything, and it's very hard to have someone committed unless they're regularly attempting to Control-Alt-Delete on their life. Worked in a hospital for a long time, had a patient come in who'd taken way too much smack. I was able to get him set on that front. However, he had necrotizing fasciitis in his pectoral from injecting there. He was septic and honestly a bit of a jerk. He kept trying to tell us the reason he was there was because of a motorcycle accident. We all knew, but he was in absolute denial. He eventually healed up and transferred out after a couple of months. He came back about 6 months later to say thank you to all of us and to apologize for all the lies and behavior. It seems it was enough to get him out of that life and onto a new one. I think about him now and then, and I hope he stayed clean. When I was a medical student, we had a patient on one of my rotations that was getting oral pain meds, but insisting that we switch them to a stronger IV pain medicine because they'd been getting nauseous and throwing up all of their meds. When our team rounded on the patient to check on them, we walked into the room and were quickly greeted by an eager patient that had been waiting to show us the bag they'd been throwing up in. Turns out that it was filled with a lovely mixture of number 1 and 2 and topped off with a handful of pills the patient had thrown in there to make it look like they couldn't keep the meds down. When we called them out, the patient was in total denial and tried to reason with us that it must be throw-up since it's in the throw-up bag. When did a clueless adult make you say, "How the hell do you not know that?" My mum can't remember whether blue or red is associated with hot or cold. When she's in the car and wants to turn on the AC, she just randomly sets the dial to one side or the other and waits for the air to come on to see whether she's right or not. I've met more than one person who just doesn't get fire alarms. When my husband and I first got an apartment together, we were cooking and we burned something. The smoke caused the smoke alarm to start beeping. Instead of opening the window to let the smoke out like a normal person, he calmly walked to the door and began putting on his shoes to go outside and wait for the fire department to come. Because he thought that when the smoke alarm goes off, that's what you do. After all, why else would we have gone through all those fire drills in elementary school? My grandmother is 88 years old, drives a Ford Mustang, doesn't know how to put gas in her car, has literally driven cars for 70 years without ever once using a gas pump. She calls me every few weeks to go over there and follow her to the gas station so I can pump for her. I don't have the heart to tell her that the employees will do it if she asks nicely, since it's one of the few occasions where I see her. My college roommate asked me how to make a sandwich, like how to actually put mayonnaise on the bread and slice a tomato. He was 22 and had been recently accepted to medical school. God help us. Context: I've been living with this girl for several months. When we were out this weekend, she wanted to take a cab home, but we were all so broke, so we took public transportation, and she took a cab with another friend of ours. When we got off the bus, 3 blocks from the apartment, we ran into our friend. He told me the following story. She gave the cab driver the wrong directions. They got to the apartment without her directions, but she didn't have her keys. She had no idea how to ring the bell to the apartment. Someone held the door for her, but she refused to go in because she thought she'd be stuck. My friend realized he was expected to help her. She never considered calling any of the other 5 of us who lived there, and now she's upset because we didn't know she didn't have her keys and won't speak to us. In short, one of our friends got lost on the way back to an apartment she's lived in for months, was locked out, and had no idea how to get in. Wow. I mean, every now and then you meet a person who you wonder how they figured out things like breathing, and it sounds like your roomie is just one such specimen. Ooh, I am all over this one. I had an old roommate and boyfriend who was very sheltered when it came to basic life stuff. Here are some highlights. First, there was laundry. He had never done it, ever. When he moved in, all of his clothes were filthy because his parents hadn't visited in 6 months or so, and so nothing had been washed since then. I had to show him how a washer-dryer worked. Then there was the cooking. He could only use a microwave. Making ramen on a stove was a mystery. More than once I saw him crunching his way through a half-cooked packet because he didn't get the water past warm. And third were the bananas. This is my absolute favorite. I came home with fruit. His parents were also not good with encouraging a healthy diet. I handed him a banana. He bit into the skin, looked confused, saw me looking at him oddly, and I had to show a 21-year-old man how to open a banana. He had eaten them many times before and had never been shown or asked to peel his own. In short, American adult male had never peeled a banana. Some parents don't teach that stuff. How are you going to learn if you never got to do something? Except the banana thing. What the frick? My girlfriend in college didn't know how to boil water. I explained how easy it was. Water goes in the pot, pot goes on the stove, turn on the stove. She did it, then left the pot there for hours, waiting for the water to, quote, finish boiling. Of course, all of the water evaporated, she completely burned the crap out of the pot, and then started to panic and cry because she didn't know how to turn the stove off. I am no longer with this girl. Well, here's one that's a little different. My dad's college roommate was in town a few weeks back, so my dad and I went to meet him, grab a beer, and shoot the crap. While we were hanging out, they did a little reminiscing, and they mentioned the roommate's girlfriend from freshman year. Apparently, this girl had watched a few too many musicals and actually genuinely thought that people in relationships would actually sing to each other. They went on one date and it was fine. The second date was okay, but the girl seemed a bit distant at the end. He went on a third date and she asked, "Why don't you ever sing to me?" His response was along the lines of, "Why the frick would I be singing?" She complained that if he really liked her, he'd just sing to her, or at least try. There didn't have to be any dancing, just singing. He thought she was joking, so he made a sarcastic comment about how stupid that was. She didn't appreciate it. My dad and his roommate were convinced that she was joking and just messing with him. The roommate even went over to her room, and the girl's roommate wouldn't let him in to see her because she was so heartbroken. A few weeks later, the girl's roommate apologized because she didn't realize how crazy the reason for the breakup had been. In short, why the frick would you demand anyone just burst into song? In high school, there was one time I was going to give a friend a ride home after a band practice or something, since somebody hadn't come to pick him up, and he said it was going to be a long while. He told me which direction to start in, but as we continued driving, it became clear that he actually didn't know where he lived. He didn't know the address or how to get there from the school he goes to every weekday. He tried giving terrible directions like, "It's near the flashing yellow lights," during the drive. I couldn't believe that this high school sophomore actually had no idea where he lived. I had to end up just taking him back to the school so his mum could pick him up. I'm not sure if it fits, but several years ago in a game of Scrabble, I tried to play CLIT. Classy, I know. And a 23-year-old girl asked, "What's that?" She had been raised pretty conservatively. Not my story, but my sister's. She was a residential advisor for first years in college. She smelled smoke in the common room and found out that a girl had put a bowl with foil in the microwave and it was on fire. She put the fire out. The girl came out and said it was her food and she thought foil would make it heat faster in the microwave. Well, she wasn't wrong. I met a woman in a parking garage that didn't know that her key could unlock the door. She flagged me down to ask if I could give her a ride to get a battery for the key fob that unlocked the door so she could get into her car. When I was younger, I dated a 19-year-old guy that didn't know how to use a steak knife. Instead of sawing the meat, he attempted to force the knife through it by simply pushing down. I don't know if you don't know this, dude, but steak is not quite the same consistency as softened butter. He kept shaking the entire table. We were in a restaurant, and he tried to force the knife into the meat. Eventually, I stopped him, took his knife and showed him how to saw the meat. His mind was completely blown. When I asked him how the F it was possible that he didn't know how to do this, he told me, "Oh, my parents usually just let me pick up the meat in my hands at home." We broke up a couple of months later. I went on a date with a girl back in my ultra-conservative Christian university, and she had a menstrual incident. She wasn't just embarrassed, but genuinely indescribably afraid that she was going to bleed to death, quote, "this time." I ran into a store, bought her some replacement jeans and tampons, and acted as nonchalant as I could. I have a gift in that I truly lack the ability to give a judgmental F about people in moments like these. I'm just very clinical about things, so people quickly get over being embarrassed in front of me. So I was able to get to the bottom of this little mishap. Turns out, through the years of being raised in a religious, euphemism-laden information vacuum, she'd somehow associated that time of month with her feelings of liking a boy who God disapproved of. To her mind, the blood was there to discourage any bedroom activity and to punish her. She also didn't know enough about feminine hygiene products to know how to use them, so she'd been using stacks of tissues for years. She couldn't even conceive of the idea of tampons. In her mind, she'd consented to go to dinner and the movies with me knowing she was risking God's wrath. I found that very touching. Also, she thought our school's policy of separate swim times for women and men was because women could get pregnant swimming in the same water as men while wearing swimsuits. No, she wasn't stupid. 4.0 GPA, 3/4 of a ride scholarship, business and accounting major. She was just so sheltered. This was in 1991. And as usual, parentally forced hardcore religion is the bad guy. I just feel sad for anyone growing up feeling that their natural urges make them evil and wrong in any way. And going so long without the same convenient sanitary products as basically everyone else because your parents won't have to talk with you is just so unfair. My 23-year-old friend just learned how to do the dishes and laundry this weekend. I'm kinda proud of them. Sweeping and mopping. We had a lot of community service workers and volunteers who had no idea what to do. My roommate of 3 months now has astounded me with the inane things she just doesn't seem to grasp. For example, she saw me making a cheeseburger and promptly explained, "That's how you melt cheese on it?" or something to that effect. She put a lid on something in the microwave and the handle started to smoke and melt because she didn't think that there might be a screw holding the thing together. She follows directions on mostly cooked food, like ready rice, frozen veggies and stuff, to the letter and then doesn't understand that there might be any number of discrepancies between our appliance and the instructions, then complains that her food never cooks, and eats it anyway. Also, she can't seem to wrap her head around turning her light off when she goes to sleep and not running up the power bill, taking a half-hour-long shower in the morning while 3 other people are getting ready for the day, and insisting that her word is infallible. She's a child. I'd like to get her to move out, and this is the first place I've been able to vent about it. Happy first comment to me. Oh my god, that food thing is so funny. The roommate's like, "The pizza's still cold in the middle, I don't know why. It said to heat it for 2 minutes. Just put it in longer." It said 2 minutes. Scarfs down half-frozen pizza while glaring at you. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. How to wash your face. I think most people dating back to early humans have figured out the cup your hands under running water, lean your head over the sink, and bring your hands up to your face process. I lived with an adult girl who did not know how to do this. She'd just swat the frickin' water up at her face, get the sink, counter, and mirror, the toilet, frickin' everything soaking wet. That's how they do it in the commercials. That's how I did it at first, because that's how I saw it in commercials. After the first couple of times, I was like, I'm making a huge mess here. Better tone it down a bit. Now I just wash my face in the shower. A friend of a friend is a 20-year-old girl who doesn't know how and refuses to pump her own gas. She also refuses to be taught. She practically refuses to drive herself anywhere. For example, she lives now in a city about 2 or 3 hours away and will only ride with someone else. While traveling to a closer city, roughly an hour away, she does the same thing, to the point she missed seeing her current love interest because there was nobody to drive her. Why? It sounds like she's deathly afraid of driving as a whole and just uses this as an excuse. Unfortunately, I'd thought about that too, and I did ask her. However, she'll drive herself to work and school and home fine. She just has a princess attitude towards her life. I.e. that her ideal husband will make lots of money, she won't have to work or do anything except whatever the F she wants, but stand there and look pretty. Her words mainly, not mine. I'm a senior in college and I still find myself shaking my head when my classmates don't know how to use the campus bus routes to get back home. They're afraid they'll get lost and end up at rock bottom or something like that. A friend of mine tried to cook rice in the kettle because she understood it involved heat and water. That was her logical conclusion. She's 27. My brother is 16. He can't ride a bike or tie shoelaces or make food more complicated than switching on an oven or kettle. I'm concerned about not being able to tie his shoelaces. My girlfriend went 1,500 miles without getting an oil change. She thought you only bring your car in when there's a problem. My aunt went 30,000 miles with no oil change, then got mad when the dealership refused to give her a new engine because of it. I recently had to explain to someone in their 20s what transmitted diseases are. The person had no idea. I haven't truly parallel parked since the day I passed my driver's test. I avoid it like the plague. I'll even stop the car and make my friend's Chinese fire drill so someone else can park it for me. I understand the mechanics of how to do it, but I'm blind in one eye and it affects my depth perception enough to make me uncomfortable doing it. By refusing to learn, I promise I'm just looking out for the well-being of all of your vehicles. I was a class acquaintance of a pretty popular girl in my grade, so one day sitting at the popular table, kind of a big deal for me as a nerdy guy with this girl, I learned that she didn't know how to use a knife and cut up her lunch, and her lackey friend kind of did it for her as her mum did when she was home. What the frick? She was like 14. My current roommate has no idea how to shop for groceries or manage the food he's already bought. Now we live about a 3-minute walk from a pretty large grocery store, so food shopping is by no means inconvenient. His food is constantly rotting in the fridge. When he orders out, he leaves the leftovers there until they have to be thrown away. He currently has 3 half-eaten bags of chips of the same brand and flavor. He probably ends up throwing away about $100 worth of food every month. Giving tips. My friends are sweet and they do tip, but figuring out 10 or 20% is like rocket science to them. Move the decimal over, boom, 10%. You need 20%, double that crap. My car's battery was getting old and had started to die when I would park it to go to class. I come out of class one day and tried to start my car, and of course it won't start. I was cussing at it a bit and decided to wait until the person parked next to me shows up. It doesn't take long for this girl, fairly attractive, to show up and lock the new Lexus SUV right next to me. I politely ask her if she can give me a jump. She agrees as long as it doesn't hurt her car and asks me what she needs to do. I tell her all I need to do is for her to pop her hood for now and then start it when I say to. She looks at me for a second and then says, "How do I pop the hood?" Look, I don't judge. New car for her probably, and she hasn't experimented to figure it out. I open her hood for her, showing her exactly how to do it so she knows. Then hook up my jumper cables, also explaining what I'm doing. I then tell her to start her car, and she does. My car starts up fine. I tell her that that's all there is, and she can close her hood when she responds with, "Okay, but how do I do that?" Okay, well, you know what? She seems nice and you taught her 1 or 2 things about her car that day, so let's leave this poor sweet person alone and hope that university drastically broadens her general life education. A 21-year-old woman at work has 2 kids by 2 different men and her grandmother has adopted them. Said woman found out this week she's pregnant with her 3rd kid from another guy. I think 21 is old enough to know that if you've made 2 kids that somebody else has to raise, it's time to stop. I was on a backpacking trip with my 15-year-old brother and my dad this summer, and we'd just finished dinner. My dad had gone down to the lake to fish, but since I'm a wimp, I decided to make some instant cheesecake instead. My brother followed suit. I looked at the instructions, which said something like, 1. Add water. 2. Beat for 2 minutes. 3. Enjoy. So I added the water and started beating the mix, as in stirring it vigorously with a spoon. I looked over and saw my little brother holding his bag with one hand and just repeatedly punching it with the other, instant dessert flying everywhere. We had a little chat. That day he learned that violence was not always the answer. I was asking my chemistry teacher about something in high school, junior year, a few years back, and a girl was behind me with her student notebook out. I knew she probably wanted to go to the bathroom, so I told her to go ahead, and she gave her notebook to the teacher to sign her a hall pass. But he handed it back because it was blank and asked her to write the date and time. She turned around and stared at the clock, which was analog, for about 10 seconds and said, "I can't tell time." I learned lefty-loosey, righty-tighty from Barney's father in How I Met Your Mother. This feels like something I should have been taught as a kid. It is. You should yell at your parents. I had an ex-girlfriend that still couldn't figure out how to open or close blinds. She was 23. Okay, reading everyone else's answers has been great. I just learned that I'm better in life skills than a lot of people. This is my first story ever, but my story is too ridiculous not to share. So my husband and I were living with his parents for a while after he lost his job, and his 30-year-old sister was also living there while she finished nursing school and whatnot. She was an abhorrently messy person, and I had the pleasure of sharing a bathroom with her. Now, she always had an extremely heavy period, so that time of the month was a literal bloodbath everywhere. One morning I woke up for work, sleepy-eyed and grumpy, walked to the bathroom and sat down on the loo. As I was sitting there, I noticed drops of blood all over the bathroom floor. Then I glanced over to the wastebasket and noticed it was overflowing with unwrapped, bloody, disgusting pads, and they were spilling out everywhere. I was so angry because I've yelled at her for this once before. I get up to grab the Clorox wipes, and then I see that I've also sat in the blood that she left on the toilet. Mind you, I'm very sleepy and hardly had the time to come to my senses yet. I shrieked, and then I saw that I'd also stepped in it as well, because there were drops of blood on the bath mat that I didn't see, and I'd tracked it all over the fricking house. I started screaming at her from the bathroom to come clean up the fricking murder scene and to take more care of the way she leaves the bathroom. And you know what she says? "I don't need you telling me what to do." Excuse me? You're 30 frickin' years old. I can't believe I have to tell you this in the first place. You've had your period for 15 or so years and you still don't know how to wrap up a pad or wipe down a loo, and you're going to be a nurse? Are you kidding me? How to dress. Surprised by how many fellow college students show up to interviews and career fairs dressed like they're going out on a Friday night and wondering how come they didn't get called back. Roommate once asked where the stamp goes on the letter that he was sending. Anyone over the age of 18 who doesn't know how to cook for themselves. One of my former roommates, who was 23 at the time, said he'd like some popcorn while we were watching a movie. I told him I had some in the cupboard and to help himself. He grabs the popcorn, takes the cellophane off, then sheepishly walks into the room and goes, How do I do this? 23 years old, didn't know how to microwave his own popcorn. This is going to sound odd, but properly clean up the spill of a liquid such as soda, coffee, or tea. Way too many times I see someone lay down some paper towels, stomp on them, and call it clean. No. Cleaning up sticky messes is an art. First, blot but don't wipe it all up with paper towels. Next, grab a washcloth with warm water on it and wipe towards the center of the mess. You do not want to spread it outwards. Repeat. Then add a little spray cleaner to the party. If it spills near a wall, a table, or chairs, wipe them too. Then one more pass over with just warm water on a washcloth, then dry. That's how you clean up a spill. You are 70 years old. I refuse to believe that you do not yet understand the concept of promptly paying for your purchases. That's been the name of the game for over 20 years now. I still tie my girlfriend's shoelaces for her. She's picked it up now, almost, but she was never taught as a kid because her parents were never around. In college, one of my roommates came into the living room and asked me what a cookie sheet was and do we have one. I'm surprised how many people I knew back in high school and early college who were too nervous to call and order a pizza for delivery because they'd never done it before. I worked in a medical office and there were people in their 30s and upwards who didn't know anything about their medical insurance. Oh, I have copay? Why yes, it is that dollar amount on the front of your insurance card, sir. Anything else? When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.